Call the roll.
Ms. Baumke,
Here.
Mr. Cavalier,
Here.
Mr. Cohen,
Here.
Mr. Dudenheffer, Mrs. Mauer, Ms. Shelton,
Here.
Mr. Snellings.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ms. Mauer is out of town and will not be joining us today. First of all, let me apologize. I get a summer cold once every 5 years, and today is the 5th anniversary. So I'm a little stuffy. I'll try not to cough, but we'll get through it. With that said, we have a couple of proclamations. In my time of sickness, Mr. Dudenheffer, our Vice Chairman, will take over the duties. First of all is a proclamation recognizing Stafford County employees for being awarded the Top Dog United Way Award. Mr. Dudenheffer and Ms. Kraus.
Nice looking dog. Well, the United Way is obviously an organization I think that everyone is familiar with, and it's a way that you can contribute and the money gets spread across many different kinds of organizations that need support from the public. And it's a way that the county office and many county offices and governmental agencies pool together their money. There's different kind of competitions and stuff for doing that. It's not the reason you donate, but it certainly helps to be recognized for the type of contribution you can make to the United Way. The list of people they help and organizations is very long and it's very distinguished. So we have a proclamation here today from the Stafford County Board of Supervisors, and I'll read it, and then we'll ask Ms. Donna Kraus to come forward and also make some remarks. A proclamation recognizing Stafford County government employees for being awarded the Rappahannock United Way Top Dog Award. Whereas each year, the Rappahannock United Way awards the Top Dog Award to the local government or school district in Planning District 16 that holds the most successful fundraising campaign during its annual workplace campaign. And whereas the 2018 local government campaign raises $177,000, including Stafford County government, which won the Top Dog Award for the best campaign. That's the dog right there. So. Whereas the local government campaign through the Rappahannock United Way provides employees with an opportunity to support the work of local charitable organizations through the convenience of payroll deduction. And whereas the local government campaign is overseen by a committee of representatives composed of employees from the various government and school districts who establish guidelines for the campaign, with the Rappahannock United Way serving as the fiscal agent and administrator of the campaign, and evaluate and approve the nonprofit organization that is included in the campaign. A long sentence. Whereas Donna Kraus has served as the campaign committee and served on the campaign committee and led our organization's campaign tirelessly over the last several years, assisting in the conversion of the donation mechanisms to an online system and coming up with new events and incentives each year to encourage donations. And whereas Stafford County government employee as committed public employees understand how charitable giving and volunteerism positively impacts our community. And whereas through our employee donations, United Way partners with the community to improve lives by mobilizing the caring power of our community. And whereas Buddy, the top dog, as is up here, will be displayed in the custom doghouse in the County Administration Office on the 3rd floor of the George L. Gordon Jr. Government Center over the next year to honor the giving of Stafford County employees. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Stafford County Board of Supervisors on this, the 21st day of May, 2019, recognizes the Stafford County government employees for their generosity and making meaningful impact on the lives of many by donating to the Rappahannock United Way 2018 workplace campaign.
Thank you. I just want to thank the board for recognizing our employees and our organization. It is very great that all of our employees care about our community and that they actually do contribute. And it takes all of us. And thank you again for recognizing.
Thank you very much.
I was at the awards ceremony United Way had, and this award, the localities really compete over it. And Fredericksburg had it last year, and Tim Baruti had the dog there, and when they announced Donna, she went up and wrestled it out of his hands. But anyway, congratulations. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Tom Cohen to do a proclamation recognizing the Emergency Medical Services Week, and I would ask all of you guys, volunteer and career, that are involved in emergency medical services to please come down front. Don't be shy. Our TV audience only consists of about 125,000 people, so, or 125 people, whichever day it might be.
Hi, Ashley. Well, I was very honored when I was asked to give this proclamation. These men and women that serve our county and our fire and rescue and EMS work do a terrific job. Our family has used them, unfortunately, and they are there for everyone in this county when we need them. And it's only appropriate that we take some time to show our appreciation for them. So we have a proclamation, which I'll go through the reading of. Whereas emergency medical services provide a vital public need, and whereas members of Stafford County's fire and rescue emergency medical service teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continued education to enhance their life-saving skills, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden injury or illness, and whereas the emergency services system consists of emergency medical technicians, paramedics, firefighters, emergency room physicians and nurses, educators, administrators, and others, and whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and accomplishments of Stafford County's emergency medical service teams and the impact they have to our community by designating this week in their honor. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Stafford County Board of Supervisors on this 21st day of May, 2019, that it be and hereby does recognize May 19 through 25, 2019 as the Emergency Medical Services Week in Stafford County. Thank you for all you do. Which one of you great people wants to say something? Okay, don't be shy. Chief Cargello. Okay, here we go.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Knowles. I'm the Deputy Chief for EMS for Stafford County, and I'm very, very proud to be a member of this department and work with a lot of these fine folks you see up here. Now, we are a department of approximately 350 strong. That's career and volunteer, and we could not do this without the support of the Board of Supervisors, so thank you so very much for all of your support and your help. Nor could we do it without the support of the community. So we are joined here today with members of the volunteer staff, with members of the career staff, and we have some junior members here that are students at Colonial Forge High School, and we also have the EMT instructor with us. And we are just very, very glad to be here, and thank you again very much.
We have deletions and additions to the agenda and approval of the agenda. I believe, Mr. County Administrator, the only addition we have is a discussion of Kellogg Mill Road safety concerns. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion, it passes, but I don't think it tallied correctly. I believe we have a 6-0 with one absent. We're going to have a discussion concerning Kellogg Mill Road safety concerns. This came out of a result of the accident that took place last week. I've asked VDOT, Lynn Keenan is here on very short notice. Our staff has done some preliminary work, and Mr. Foley, I believe you have someone that's going to come forward and give us some recommendations.
Yes, sir. We were out at the site and did an evaluation, so we're prepared to give you a quick overview of that whenever it's appropriate.
I think we're ready.
Okay.
Yep.
We asked staff if they would come up and give an overview.
Good afternoon, Mr. Snellings and members of the board. Jason Towery, Director of Public Works. Lynn Keenan from VDOT is here as well. I'll just say that obviously our condolences go out to the family of this young lady who was tragically lost last week. We did conduct a site visit yesterday and noted a couple things that we're going to do some further follow-up on with VDOT and in regards to the entrance itself. And just to take a closer look, of course, there's still a lot of information that's being waited on at this point in regards to further investigation of the incident itself, and pending some of that information that may also direct further studies that could be done. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time. I'm sure Lynn would as well.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, there was
Go ahead.
maybe, Jason, just a quick report on
Yes, that's what
the site conditions out there, both in terms of the visual clarity as well as the surface of the ground there.
Sure. A couple of the things that we noted, just in general, in regards to the general visibility in the area, there are some things that might be done to help improve visibility for traffic either entering or exiting the site, as well as traffic passing along on Kellogg Mill Road. Of course, it's a bit of a tough angle there, so there are limitations to what can be done. And in regards to the entrance itself, I think many of you are familiar if you've been out there before. There's a bit of a wide shoulder there that's asphalt, but then beyond that, the entrance itself is gravelled. So we've had some preliminary discussions about possibly paving a little bit further along into that entrance, just to give a little bit better traction for vehicles entering and exiting the site, so that could be done more quickly. The cost to do that would probably be relatively minor, just to extend a little bit of paving further down in. And that should help improve the overall safety of the entrance.
Mr. Dudenheffer.
While I don't think speed itself, I don't think anyone was speeding in this accident based on the posted speed limit on that street. But I think anyone who rides over it knows that the posted speed limit is way too high for that stretch, from going down the hill on both sides and crossing over that very narrow bridge, many times we have pedestrians trying to cross with the cars. So what would it take to get that stretch leading into and coming out of that stretch of road, to get the speed limits reduced dramatically at this point?
Excuse me, Jason. So to be clear, we have not yet received the police report back on this, and so until we get that, we're really not ready to make further recommendations about speed. We're still looking into things as far as conditions that are specific to the site. We have committed that our state forces will go out this week and trim back some of the vegetation with the boom axe to try to improve the line of sight for left-hand turns. But at this time, anything as far as signage or speed limits, we're just not prepared until we have more information. I know that that's something that we will definitely look into, but we just need a little bit more time to get that report back from state police, get it over to our traffic engineering, and determine what the next set of actions would be. So It's just, we're kind of in a waiting game. We're just waiting to get more information before we make a firm recommendation. And I would hate to go on the record and promise you anything until we have the right recommendations about the right tools that should be used in this situation. But we can definitely look into a traffic study and see, based on the number of cars. We do have some preliminary car counts from the last time we did a traffic study. And we've done traffic studies on other sections of Kellogg Mill, but within this particular section, we have not done extensive traffic studies in the recent past.
I drive on it frequently, and I can tell you, it's a safety mess that's there. It's an accident waiting to happen, even without this most recent one. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that was the cause of the accident. I've traveled on there, and I think they're 11-foot lanes on both sides with kind of jersey wall, so you don't run off into the reservoir there. And they have pedestrians crossing there. I mean, the bridge is actually so low on the area that when we get high water, the water comes up over the bridge. I mean, to me, it was very poorly designed, but I'm sure it was poorly designed for a few cars a day, not the thousands of cars that drive on it every day. So we really need prompt action on this, and I think something we can do really fast should be the lowering of the speed limit, and with flashing lights with people coming down both those hills. So I'm asking you to please hurry and let's do something there to where we can avoid another situation like this.
Ms. Bumpy?
Yeah, so, I know Mr. Dudenheffer has mentioned earlier today that he was recently on the bridge with some students walking along. Are there designated sidewalks on that bridge?
They're not
No, so there's
designated.
nothing. Okay, that's something that maybe should be considered as well. I don't know if there's room.
I mean, we'd have to look at, I don't think we could do a designated shared use path. We
Right.
would need to send that over to our design staff to see what's appropriate based on that location and how much shoulder we have.
Right.
I would say that generally speaking, that area is not intended for pedestrian foot traffic. It has certainly occurred over time. There are a lot of folks over the years who like to go down there and recreate and use that as a way to get over to the other side of the lake. But it may also be a course of action to consider putting up some potential signage to consider, that that's not a safe point for accessing, crossing
Okay.
that lake.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a couple things. One, because a lot of times it's always nice to sort of regroup and make things clear. So in the short term, what we are looking at to deal with this issue is to deal with the vegetation. And so the clear and the site of that area can be addressed in the near term.
Correct.
So that people know that something is being done to help with that area, because that is a very problematic area. Secondly, we are looking at the idea of putting more paving into the lot where people come in and out. So there are plans in the short term to actually address the situation. Longer-term solutions, which might be flashing lights or reducing the speed or figuring out what to do about possible walkers, can be longer-term. But this, just so people know that there will be something done in the very short term on this, okay? Secondly, I think we need holistically to look at something. I was chagrined to find out from students and from parents how many knew about how bad the visual path was there after the fact. And I think while we did a tremendous quantitative study of roads in the county, we didn't do a qualitative study. And so we need people to reach out to us to tell us of different areas that are problematic, especially as we head into the summer where young people will be out and about. So people need to contact us, contact the county, whether it be an entrance to someplace or whether it be some type of intersection. And we were talking about this this morning, but going downtown and country now to where it hits Ferry Road, because of the vegetation, because of the amount of rain we had, the trees have grown up higher than normal. And so while we can't solve everything, we can't solve anything if we aren't told. And so I implore people to reach out and tell us.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
To
Ms.
that
Shelton?
end, they
Oh, I'm
can also
sorry.
reach out directly to VDOT. We have an online as well as a phone call system where citizens can call VDOT and put in work orders. I do warn, we have 4,700 of those in our system right now, which we are working through as quickly as we can with our state forces. But that is also another avenue that we have, and we track every single one of those. So we are working to fix those as well.
Ms. Shelton?
Mr. Chairman, I understand that VDOT has a process that they need to go through. I would like us to consider penning a letter to request that VDOT lower that speed limit while they're going through that process as a potential acceleration of this overall impact to this particular road. And by the way, Kellogg Mill was number 4 on our list of roads that had issues, so we're well aware of the challenges this had, not necessarily about the visibility. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. Anyone else? Mr. Dudenheffer?
On a visibility issue also, on the intersection of Stefaniga and Mountain View Road, it's a dangerous left turn out on Stefaniga to start with, and now that the vegetation and the grass and whatever has grown up high, it's even made it worse. So I would, if you're going to go out and start chopping down weeds, there's a place where I think you should go to also.
So yes, sir. We start within the primaries, so we're doing Route 1 and 17 first, and then we have that on the schedule to do in the first 2 weeks of June. So we work based off the highest level of traffic, and for Stafford County, that's the primaries. So we're trying to get those as close trimmed back. That also removes a lot of the opportunities where water stands on the road, which we've had accidents associated with that. But we do have Stefaniga and Mountain View on our work list in the next.
How many times a year are you actually cutting grass now on
We
public?
cut grass 3 times a year.
Okay. Do you think that's adequate in some of the places like we're talking about?
As we need to, we go out and do it more if we have state forces available. We did apply a plant growth retardant to a number of our primaries to help reduce the growth. We applied that earlier in the month of May, so that has helped us reduce some of that we can try to extend the period as we get back into our mowing season.
Right. Well, these roads, the ones we're talking about here, now, if somebody bumps the back of a car on Interstate 95, all of these roads back up because of the amount of traffic that's on them, which makes it more unsafe for these kids who are just trying to get home from school or go to school with all the extra commuter traffic that doesn't really care how fast they're going or where they're heading. So this is very personal for me, so we need to be much more aggressive than we are. We're failing these kids. Not you personally, okay, but overall we are. So, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Let me see if I can, how soon are you going to be doing the cutting of the trees and the
We're
weeds?
doing it this week.
You're doing it this week. And Jason, how soon can we get that front section of that driveway paved?
I'll have to take a look to see if we have the ability to, I'll have to take a look contractually how long it'll take, but pretty quick. It's a low dollar amount, I would say.
Okay, well, we're not, I appreciate your concern, but we're not concerned about the dollars. I mean, we'll find the money.
Sure.
This was a horrific accident, affected a lot of people. Thank you. We will have time, we don't have time for questions and answers here, but next is presentations by the public. And anyone who would wish to speak to the board on any issue, whether it be this issue or another matter, you'll have 3 minutes. I ask that when you approach the podium, that you state your name and your address. The green light will come on. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Once the yellow light comes on, it means you've got about a minute. And when the red light comes on, we ask that you wrap up your comments. So with that said, Mr. Adams, I think you're first up. If you state your name and address, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Snellings. Jeff Adams, 449 Kellogg Mill Road. Been going across this bridge for 40 years. Used to be a boundary line. School buses didn't go across it for the first 20 years. My daughter, bus turned around, went all the way back up to Poplar to Truslow to get to Stafford High School. Buses didn't go across. When I moved here, there was 1% traffic compared to what it is today. Growth has occurred, yes. There wasn't a center line. We dealt with it. But 40 years ago, you could see from this point here to that point there, and you could see a vehicle. Today, between the trumpet vine, the multiflora rose, the other trees, you can't see crap. At best, you've got a 150-foot sight distance. And I'm going to be so arrogant to tell you that when I pull out of there, I don't look. I open my window, I listen, because I know I cannot see a vehicle. It's impossible. 40 years of experience driving that bridge. I've been over it many times. Like many of you, I don't think speed is an issue, but I'll make you a promise. You give me the go-ahead, and by Memorial Day, you will be able to see between those two pins. I can get enough people with chainsaws. I've got a tractor. I'll give you the sight distance that was there 40 years ago that you don't have now. That's county property. You can vote. Many of you know how to get hold of me. All I need is a go-ahead. I will take care of it. Mr. Stellings, many of you know I live about here. Children on this bridge, I've dodged them. They go down this area right over there, that salmon color, they party. I've been involved with a head-on collision on that hill because of teenagers wanting to turn to go to that party spot. This is real to me. I was lucky. I survived. Couple of other suggestions. You can come right here and put in a 6-foot convex mirror pointed up the hill like you see at locations. You can do that. You can put, oh, I see my light's on. You can put up whatever the appropriate distance is, hidden entrance signs. You can put up a flashing line, and if the money was available, you could even put a sensor there so that lights would blink to tell that somebody's there. I mean, I know money's an issue. You can't spend $100 million to build a new bridge, but I can get that clearing done for you, and it won't cost the county one single penny. I just need a yes. Thank you for your time. Oh, I will leave this here for you to.
Okay, just set it over the railing there. That'll be fine. Thank you, Mr. Adams. You had some good suggestions. And we'll certainly take a look at them. I think when the final report comes back on the accident, I think that'll give VDOT the opportunity to sit down and decide which different suggestions will work for that site. But thank you very much. Anyone on my right? Yes, sir. Come on up. How you doing?
How are you, Mr. Snelling?
Good, thank you.
My name is Thomas Gregory Motto. I live on Gable Court here in Stafford. First, I want to commend the board, and particularly the chairman, for bringing this matter onto the agenda as quickly as possible. I think it's important, and particularly important for young people to see government by the people, for the people, responding to an incident like this that directly affects the whole community. I have, and I won't go through all the details because I'm sure other people have suggestions, but I did print out a list of about 10 different suggestions for improvements based upon some other studies. And as you know, Mr. Snellings, the state traffic data lists a whole number of accidents. But I was compelled to come to speak today in part because of what happened to Helen Wang, but also because about 7 years ago, I was traveling south on Kellogg Mill Road, and I came upon an accident that happened just seconds before in exactly the same mechanism. A vehicle driven by a coworker of mine coming from Quantico was driving south down the hill toward Able Lake, and a group of teenagers coming out of Able Lake Lane turned left to go north on Kellogg Mill Road. And she struck them, T-boned them, and drove them into the oncoming lane. It happened within seconds upon my arrival on the scene. I had to brake to avoid, and the first thought, to be honest with you, in my mind, in addition whether someone was injured or dead, was really that the only thing that could make this worse would be more vehicles coming down and hitting everyone who had gathered around the accident. So I was fortunate enough that I had road flares, and I just yelled that I'd be back, and I drove to the top of the hill, dropped the road flare on that hill, turned around, drove to the top of the other hill, dropped the road flare to try to slow the traffic. So it isn't merely that it's dangerous for the people in the intersection that are coming on the Able Lake Boat Access Road. It's really that it's a death trap for every accident that occurs there. I did speak earlier today to the Coxes, who I know you know, who live in the house that overlooks this intersection. Mrs. Cox was emphatic. Tell them, I don't know if the Coxes are here. There we go. But she said, tell them if they need approval to wipe out the trees along my property, they can get it, and maybe Mr. Cox will speak to that. But I think the community is really, this has kind of been a silent killer that a lot of us have known about. It's something we inherited with Virginia's colonial roads, but it is, we've reached a tipping point where something has to be done. And I'll leave this here with the clerk.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. State your name. Are you a student?
I am.
You do not have to state your address.
Okay. Crap. Okay, we're good. My name is Alexis Sermon, and last year on the back roads, there was a crash with Mabry Fry and Kyle Morgan. Mabry hit a pothole, and it threw the car in front of a Silverado, and Kyle died. This year, Helen Wang got T-boned while pulling out of a Able Lake parking lot. Our back roads are horrible. They are god-awful, and I mean god-awful. I ride those things every day. I hate 95. I hate 610. They suck just as well, but the conditions of our back roads are possibly the worst I've seen, and I am always in another place. And examples would be Trustlow and Poplar. When you're on these turns, there are drop-offs that can go from literally 3 to 4 feet, and it's just, especially on the turns. Thank you. And when you're taking them, no matter if you change the speed limit, there's always going to be people who push it or drive what they feel comfortable. And so it's less about trying to state new rules and more about trying to make things better. And with those drop-offs, literally just filling in dirt with them would literally help. We have the money, we can do it. And then Raymouth Church to Forge, a bunch of kids take that. Instead of going all the way down to Raymouth, it goes through Kellogg and then Forge. That road, I've literally almost gone head-on with cops. Like, no matter how you drive, it's super narrow, and there's a bunch of holes in there. Like, you hit one, and your car's gonna jerk. It's just how it is. And then Shelton Shop onto Whining Creek. When you're turning off Whining Creek, it's the same thing. You can barely see to your left, and then the right, it's so narrow that when you pull out, and I drive an SUV, it's hard to not come into oncoming traffic. That's another road. So literally, instead of waiting for someone to die, we need to take care of it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board? Please state your name, but if you're high school, do not state your address.
Hi, my name is Michael Sampson. I am a former student of Colonial Forge High School, and my address is 53 Bayberry Lane. I was a classmate of Helen's. I was a teammate of Helen's. Helen was a friend. And I am thankful that we are having this conversation. But I am disappointed that it is happening under these conditions. Yes, the roads need improvement, and I know everyone in this room knows that. Because you could ask any high schooler who drives to school, and they would tell you exactly where the roads need improvement. I believe that it's important for us to reach out to students and ask these questions, because I know that when I went to Forge, which was last year, I would get to school, and so many of my friends, including myself, would say exactly where we almost died that morning because we had to take a risk, because the roads, in our driver education classes, we're told you need to be driving safe, you need to be following the laws. But when following the laws is not enough to keep you safe, and you have to risk your life to get out of a parking lot, what do you do then? When the roads you drive on that are funded by your tax dollars are not enough to keep you safe, who's at fault then? Who do you go to? Just today, I was driving here on Kellogg Mill Road, and the grass was so high that I could not see a car speeding well above the speed limit crossing into my lane of oncoming traffic. And all I could think of was how many other places in the county are just like that. So I ask that moving forward, because it is too late, moving forward, we take the opportunity to have these discussions under conditions that are not when someone is no longer with us. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? And once again, if you're a student, give your name, but do not give your address.
Hi, I'm Jan Lawing. I was with Helen that day. We were having a picnic. It was me, 2 other people, and Helen. For some reason, I'm usually always in the car with her. She picks me up for school every morning. We drive to practice. We drive to work. We drive back home together. I've never gone more than 48 hours without seeing her, or more than 2 hours without texting her. The last couple days have been complete misery for us and her family. I pulled out in front of her that day. For some reason, I was driving my dad's car. I wasn't in the car with her. And I can tell you that Helen's always a very, very careful driver. She's always just lets people go first. She's always going just under the speed limit. She freaks out when she goes over. She gets scared a cop might see her or something. So she's always so careful. The problem with this specific accident was she couldn't see. I couldn't see. I pulled out in front of her. I couldn't see. I couldn't see the road to the side of me. So I just held my breath, and I went, and I was fine. And then 5 to 7 seconds later, Helen pulls out. And she probably held her breath too, and she went. And she wasn't fine. The vegetation should have been cut up the next day. I think road maintenance is something that definitely needs to be done. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Amritha Obeneni. I'm also a student at Colonial Forge High School, and what I wanted to bring up was that, yes, a tragedy happened, but I was driving down that very same road the next morning, and 90% of the people who were driving it had no clue that it had happened. The wreckage had been cleared up. There was no evidence that Helen had passed away the night before, and what I'd like to know is if there's any way to commemorate Helen's life and allow people to see that something had happened there, so they're not just driving recklessly. I've gone 60 down that road before when I take the old car and it can't get up the road as fast as the new one. And I know how fast people go, but I'd like people to understand that something has happened there, and in order to do that, I think even just a sign commemorating Helen's life or something there just to know that something did happen would be wonderful, and I think it would be a reminder to everyone to drive more safely and to not take as many risks while they're driving. Thank you.
Thank you. Before the next speaker, I would ask VDOT, I believe there is a program that a plaque can be placed at that site. That's an excellent suggestion, by the way. Lynn, I'll let you address that.
Yes, sir. We have a roadside memorial program, and we can have those put up under permit if they're requested. So whether it be by the board or by the family, we're happy to work with you to get those done.
Well, I certainly think we need to consult with the family before any decision's made, but we'll pursue that.
Yeah, we're happy to provide that information if necessary.
If you could, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am. Please come on down.
Hi, my name is Laura Barham, and I'm a student at Colonial Forge High School. I didn't know Helen directly, but the aftermath of her loss has greatly impacted, as you can see, the sea of yellow. Our whole Forge family has just been through the ringer. After her memorial service at the Jeff Rouse Center Friday night, a couple of friends and I drove past where the accident had occurred, and it seemed like nothing had moved since that day. I even pulled over into where she pulled out of and got hit head on, and I'm just shocked that not even maybe the gravel was brushed. Just like many others, I don't think money is the problem here. I would be willing to even go out myself and clear the vegetation. I just think something has to be done before another one of our friends is taken too soon. So thank you.
Thank you. As VDOT said earlier in their presentation, that site will be cleared this week, in the next couple of days from vegetation. So thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Isabella Miller. I'm a student at Forge as well, but I live in the subdivision that's like less than a mile away, Able Lake Forest. So I drive that road pretty much every day, and I'd like to call to attention the fact that they're actually looking at plans to implement another 50-home neighborhood right in that area, so it's going to be a lot more traffic on that road, driving that road every single day. And I agree with everything the other speakers have said, but I'd like to particularly point out the first speaker and the solutions that he made. Paving the road, adding the blind spot mirrors would be a really big thing, and then also adding a sign just stating that there's like a turnoff, because honestly, if you're driving down that road, I've had people go and turn around in really weird places in front of me because they were looking to go into Able Lake, but they missed the turnoff. Because I know there's people that come from out of the county that go to fish on this lake or recreate on this lake, and they have no visibility of where the turn-in is, so some sort of sign indicating where the turn-in is. But I also ask, I mean, there's been, 3 accidents in the last probably month that have happened. I know a car just flipped a couple months ago. One of my other friends got into a rear-ended accident on that same spot, and then obviously this death just occurred. But I just ask, why did it take this tragedy for us to look at the improvements we need to make in this road and roads across the county? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Imes. I'm a student at Colonial Forge as well. After this incident, I did a little bit of research to kind of support where I'm coming from. So I went on the Stafford County government website where it cites different construction things that are going on with the different roads. And it states that right now Poplar Road is in a phase 3 of their construction, and Poplar and Mountain View have both gone through phases 1 and 2 of their construction, yet there has been no construction on Rameth Church Road or Kellogg Mill Road or recently Stefanica, which are places where there are also major accidents that are occurring. I have 3 printouts of maps in the last 3 years on accidents that have happened on Kellogg Mill. I can give you these after I'm done. On November 16th of 2018, Jeff Branscombe of the Freelance Star put out an article titled Stafford Looking to Fix the Most Dangerous Roads. So I just want to ask, why is it since then there have been numerous fatal accidents on the back roads of Kellogg Mill Road, yet Stafford County focuses on widening Courthouse Road? The Courthouse Road Interchange project rounds to about $149.4 million, and the widening rounds to $35.9 million, according to a VDOT release document. Traffic can be bad on Courthouse, but few accidents have resulted in deaths on Courthouse. A VDOT document describes the construction on Route 630 states, recent development and continued future growth of the Courthouse Road corridor and adjacent communities requires additional capacity to reduce delays and improve quality of life for residents and visitors of the area. Where is the mention of multiple deaths along a road? Where is the mention of the dangers this road poses as it stands before construction? I'd like everyone to take a minute and let's take a trip down some of these dangerous back roads. On May 16th, 2019, at approximately 4:48 p.m. at 629 Kellogg Mill Road, a dump truck T-boned a Honda Civic carrying 2 teenagers, one who was DOA and one who was ALS, and was transported to Mary Washington Hospital. It was the driver's birthday. Her friends told her happy birthday, they would see her tonight, not knowing what horrible things would follow. The spot she pulled out of has a very large blind curve, which is presumably what aided in the collision. On March 29, 2018, Kyle Morgan, 16, died from injuries sustained in a head-on collision shortly after 7 a.m. that Thursday in the 1900 block of Poplar Road, about 4 miles from Mountain View High School. He was a passenger in a 2005 Honda Accent that crossed the center line and struck a 2003 Chevrolet Silverado, according to a search warrant filed in Stafford Circuit Court. This area of the road has a very sharp curve the driver was trying to avoid. On September 29, 2011, at approximately 4:30 p.m. on Kellogg Mill Road, a 24-year-old male rounded a curve which was too sharp and sent his car into a tree, killing him on impact. He was wearing a seatbelt. Colonial Forge High School is no stranger to the grief and suffering of accidents. Over the course of the 2003-2004 school year, 5 of its students tragically lost their lives in 4 separate accidents. In 2004, Stafford Supervisor Mark Dudenheffer's daughter, Emily, died after a car crash on Mountain View Road due to the twisting terrain. 15 years later, the roads still have not improved. One article is titled, "Crashes, Too Many Teens in Cars," as if age is the only thing that plays into car crashes and deaths. Yes, statistically, teenagers do drive more recklessly than adults, but a piece of paper does not represent how well you can drive, and neither does age. I have seen grown men and grown people lose control of their vehicle and drive recklessly. Age is not the only factor in this, and I'd like to take this into account. I would also like to ask questions regarding the case of the May 16th accident.
Miss, I'll have to ask you to wrap up your comments.
No problem.
Thank you.
I am aware that Kellogg Mill is not the only road that is dangerous because of other roads, but I would just like to propose that we take Kellogg Mill Road and do things such as horizontal and vertical curve realignment, typical adjustments such as lane width and sight distance improvements.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to address? Yes, please come down.
Hello, my name is Bianca West. I'm a teacher at Ronnie Thompson, but I am Helmstone coach. I live at 207 Healy Court. As tragic as this is, I would also like to address that until this year, Colonial Forge and a few other high schools have had morning swim practice at the Jeff Rouse Center. Previously, when I swam, it was at Woodlands. We require the swimmers to be there at a little after 5 a.m. to get in an hour's practice, and then to get on the bus in time to get to their respective high school. However, it then falls on the coaches some mornings to make a decision, we're winter sport, to make a decision as to whether we should cancel due to weather conditions, given that half of Colonial Forge's population, swim team-wise, comes from 17. So given that the opportunity for any high school, not just Colonial Forge, to have practice in the morning at the Rouse Center, I think you should also be looking at what time you address school closures or delays, because it did come down to the coaches some mornings that we have to consider our kids driving on those back roads before you even consider if the kids should be coming or not.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Fulmore, and I live along 17, and I have been driving for less than a year, and many, of the students here, have been driving for less than a year, and it's going to happen. There's always going to be new drivers that live in Stafford County, and as a driver in Stafford County, I prefer back roads to 95 because of how bad traffic is, and I'm sure we all understand that, but the main problems that come across for me is both the fact that on many curves, you don't see who's coming on the other side. So many times there's potholes in the road that are very bad, and I sometimes will go over into the lane because I don't want I want to get a flat tire, and that's always a risk. And I understand that, and I try to be as careful as I can when I do that. But that's along many roads in Stafford County. Green Bank Road has multiple turns where you cannot see from your left or from your right, and I often like as Jane said, like I hold my breath and I just hope that like I try to listen as best as I can. And Kellogg Road is one of the worst roads. I drive there every morning. I drive there every afternoon. And I know that you guys obviously have it clear in your heads that that is a road that needs to be focused on. But basically, I would just request that you look among all the back roads, because teenagers lived all over Stafford County, all along the back roads. And oftentimes we can't see what's coming from the left or right, and we're not as experienced as older drivers to know what are the telltale signs that a car is approaching. So I think it would be really honoring to look into the back roads, look at the potholes that oftentimes cause drivers to go into the other lanes, because that's, I think, a big problem. And just visibility and like what the mirror and everything, I'm sure that's a really cheap and like really effective thing that could be put into and could be put and thought into all these turns that like take lives or cause accidents. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi. My name is Alex Goodwin. I am a government teacher at Colonial Forge High School. A lot of these kids, some of them are my students. I just wanted to say that I am extremely proud of them for what they're doing today. I try to tell them not that if they see something in government, to be the change, to go out and make the change happen, not just complain about it or sit on Twitter about it, but do something about it. And to see them come out and actually try and do something about it today is remarkable to me. I'm very proud of all of them, those that are my students, those that are not my students. I am. I just wanted to say that they're doing things the right way. They're coming here. They are presenting the problem to you guys. They are asking you to help them and solve it. So they're putting their faith in you to do something and solve this problem. So help them out here, and don't just, show them that that Stafford County government is something worth putting faith into. Okay? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address the board? Yes, Ms. Hazard.
I'm not young enough. I know I have to state my address. Good afternoon. My name is Holly Hazard, and I live at 59 Harwell Drive and currently represent the Hartwood District on the school board, one of the districts that has many of these roads. Before I go into the other part of my comments, I really liked Mr. Cohen's comments about seeking our students' input, but I think there's another group of people that you have at the ready that could tell you about the school, about the roads, is our bus drivers. Every day, our bus drivers traverse this county, and they know where the problems are. We have them. They love our students, and I know they would like to be part of any kind of group that would be formed. On a personal note, the 1900 area of Poplar Road, the intersection of Mountain View and Poplar Road would be some other areas that we need to look at. I am happy to work with Mr. Snellings about getting the area in front of Hartwood Elementary School moved from a 35 mile per hour speed limit to 25. We really need to get that done. We cross across the street to go over to the church to do anything at Hartwood Elementary School. I'd like to just also say I attended the Finance and Budget Committee meeting where I learned that the board is considering a new process for placing new schools on the capital improvement plan. As you all know, I supported a process, a joint process. However, I admit neither board was really committed to the process and the collaboration I envisioned, and it just didn't materialize. So I know that the school board does not have a seat at the table like we did before, so I'm going to bring my suggestions directly to you and urge you to consider a faster track for high school number 6. The new process being discussed sets forth the following timeline: 2 years land acquisition, 2 years planning, 4 years of construction. That's 8 years. I really appreciate that it was brought up at that meeting that maybe we don't have to wait 8 years. We can maybe make that not a linear, I believe was the word that was used. Please don't make it 8 years. This timeline would get in motion when 90% of design capacity has been achieved, as stated in the comprehensive plan. So where are we today? November 28 data, high school number, this year, 89.1%, next year, 89.4%. Middle school, 84.8, 88.7. Elementary, 86 and 87. Why I speak today is I want you to also consider a few other factors besides capacity at a high school, not just 100%. How long are our bus rides? What are the roads that our kids are using to get to these schools? Please don't just make it about one factor and capacity. It is important. But maybe when we get to the 85% design capacity, maybe we can say, how far are our kids driving? How long are our bus commutes? What other factors are important to bringing this high school? $100,000 was put in to study this. Please don't throw out that work. It was in after we did the high school redistricting for Colonial Forge. Please, please, please don't slow down the high school number 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hazard. Anyone else in the board chambers like to address the board?
Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane. Every time I come here to give a 3-minute speech, I never know how I'm going to be moved. I'm wearing a sea of orange today because in Stillwater, Oklahoma, the water's not still today. It's 38 years ago that I graduated on an Air Force scholarship from Oklahoma State, and I was on my way to officer training school. And the speeches today moved me in ways that brought back a key memory that I remember. One of my Boy Scout buddies who was killed in Buffalo, New York in a car accident. And I think it's very important that safety is paramount in the Air Force for a reason. And I think you really heard the first speaker really got me because a picture's worth 1,000 words. If we're not using technology like simple things like a convex mirror, how about Alexa? You know, all you got to do is she's out there and she knows what's going on. You got to warn people about using those 5 senses, especially when you're driving. When I took driver's ed, I remember Mr. Bicena taking me up the Skyway in Buffalo, New York, and it's just as scary as Kellogg. And I stay off Kellogg because it just, the road scares me. And I'm a pretty competent driver. The only time I've been in accidents is someone has hit me from behind, something I can't control. Now, I think it's very important that you came out as a sea of yellow because the yellow ribbon is so important in this country, especially during Vietnam when it didn't happen. Just so you know, 1960 to 1975, there's those of us who don't forget. There are 167 days till Election Day. And the reason I bring that up is because it's a prime number. As soon as I'm done speaking, I'm going to the registrar's office, and I'm going to try to get on the ballot to become the next Commissioner of Revenue. I encourage each of you students who are seeking a PhD, that's a public high school diploma. I already have mine from New York. And I'm so glad for all those high school teachers who ingrained in my life that being a leader is more important than just following.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to address the board on any issue or subject? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. I want to thank everybody for being here this afternoon, especially the students. I urge you, do not give up. Continue to be involved. Continue to come to these meetings. Together we will solve this. Okay? Bring it back to the board. Board reports.
Mr. Snellings?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, yes.
So I just have a concern And this is a little out of the realm of what we normally do, so I'll say that as I'm starting. But after listening to all these students' painful comments at the podium and what Mr. Adams said, I guess I feel, and I don't represent that area, I don't live in that area, but that picture that Mr. Adams showed us, the fact that those trees have not been cut since last Thursday just is mind-boggling to me. The fact that people are holding their breath as they're making turns is not acceptable, and I know you know that. I'm asking the board, what can we do to make sure that Lynn gets a message to her people from VDOT? Those trees need to be cut tomorrow. Tomorrow.
Let's get back to the board here. Hold on just one second. Go ahead, Ms. Bonke.
That's all I have to say. In my mind, Friday isn't acceptable. Thursday isn't acceptable. This has to happen now.
I don't disagree with you, Ms. Bonke, but I think we have to look at reality. Reality is we've got this situation in a lot of different places in this county. And one of the main reasons we have it is because we had so much rain last year. I had to have a tree company come into my yard last Friday and cut the limbs because they'd grown so fast and so long, I couldn't see out of my driveway. I know it's, and maybe we ought to consider closing that landing until this is done. I don't have a problem with that. I don't know if other board members would have a problem with that or not, but if it is that bad, if people have to hold their breath coming out of there, I would ask the county administrator, if the rest of the board agrees, that we close this spot until this work is done. Is that acceptable to everyone?
Mr. Snelling,
Mr. Cavalier.
since we're kind of out of order now anyhow, first of all, I would like to pass along my condolences to Helen Wang's family and friends. Many of you here today, and you know, I'm not in charge of the day-to-day activities, but if I were in charge of VDOT, and if I were in charge of the county, exactly what Meg said, the first thing tomorrow morning, I would suspend any other work that's in the way and get out there to this site, cut the damn grass, and start cutting the trees back. And Mr. Adams, I can't give you the permission to do that, but the officer standing behind you, I'm sure won't come and arrest you if you do it. And you can tell him I said it was okay. If you want to do it, go ahead. I know Bob very well. He's out in Wadwater with me. So listen, this has to be done now. No more screwing around. There's no reason we can't send out work crews tomorrow. And if I'm wrong, you know, you tell me, but I'm not wrong.
Okay, is the board in agreement that we will close that site until the work is done? Hear any objections whatsoever? Madam County Attorney, do I need a vote on that?
Mr. Chairman, I think the message from the board's clear, and we can execute that. right
Okay,
away.
the site will be closed immediately?
Yes, sir.
Until the work is done. Reports by board members.
Ms. Baumke?
Wow. Kind of want to scratch everything that I've prepared here because that situation is so emotional. But I do have a lot to report to the board. I've had a number of meetings since our last board meeting. I'd like to thank the sheriff. We had a wonderful annual banquet, and I want to thank the folks at Mount Ararat Church that actually prepared and served our meal that night. It's very much appreciated, and you all at Mount Ararat continue to support this community in an unbelievable way. I also want to thank, and it's fine if you students would like to leave. You're not being rude. If you'd like to stay, we'd love for you to stay as well. I'd like to thank John Holden and the Economic Development Department for their Business Appreciation Week that they held at Six Bears and a Goat. And I really liked the interaction that we had with the business partners. He had 3 people up sitting at the front, and it was an interactive process, and it was well done. So thank you for kind of thinking out of the box. This past weekend, I was down in Wythe County for the VACO board meeting, and we always go to the May board meeting wherever the president of VACO is located, and Wythe County is really beautiful. I think they have more cattle in that town than they have people, but let me tell you, that beef tasted really good. Phyllis Enrico, who is the counsel for the Virginia Association of Counties, has worked with 44 other Virginia attorneys on the new Virginia Supervisors Manual. I did not bring it with me, but it is this thick, and it's 8.5 by 11, and they will be handing them out over the next year. If you are planning on attending the Region 7 meeting down at Mount Pelier, they will have some there, and you can take them out of the box. And that date is June 13th. Also, just wanted to remind my colleagues, as the chairman of the annual conference committee for VACO, if you do have any subjects that you would like addressed for the breakout sessions at the VACO conference, please let me know. I did attend the ribbon cutting for the 4 new outdoor tennis courts and 2 pickleball courts at the Massachusetts YMCA branch last week, and I just want to say that that ribbon cutting was not just about the tennis community and the outside courts. It was much bigger than that. It's really about helping those that are less fortunate and those with disabilities come out and play tennis. John Freed, who is the brother of Adam Freed from Atlantic Builders, you all know them. They've been very active and supportive of our community. His brother was an Olympian, and so he was recognized, and I just want to give a big special thank you to Adam Freed and his mother, Barbara. They were major donors in those outdoor tennis courts, as well as others from the community. I did not get an opportunity to go over to the Boots House, which stands for Bringing Occupational Opportunities to the Stafford Schools, but I want to let everybody know that the Boots House is on Deacon Road, across the street from the Weiss grocery store. And I had a few other commitments that night, but I'm hoping that Bobby Jett from Stafford High School will give me my own personal tour. But this program is actually funded by the Boots Foundation. It's not funded by the school division. And they always build a great house, and it's for sale. So if you're interested in buying it, go check it out. Let's see. I also had yesterday with Donna Kraus, who's over there serving as our interim clerk, interim deputy clerk, I should say, the CPMT meeting, and that stands for Community Policy Management Team. We use a lot of acronyms around here. And I just want to mention that this committee is made up of healthcare people, the supervisor of education for Stafford County Public Schools of special ed, the director of RACSB, the executive director of social services. We have Michael Muse from our department, Donna Kraus, and the Department of Juvenile Justice and the Health Department. And yesterday we had a very complicated foster care issue, which obviously is confidential and cannot be shared. But I just want to say that these are the kinds of things that our community takes care of. And the amount of detail and the amount of ownership that they take in making sure that a child is placed where they really will hopefully thrive is really unbelievable. And I've never been a part of this committee since I've been on the Board of Supervisors, but I really want to thank Donna and her people for just your leadership there on that board. And on a really positive note, I want to say that, and they gave us this budget, that we projected $5.5 million for the Community Services Act this year for our CSA, and they are coming in under budget by $500,000. This has not happened in many, many years. In fact, Bill Tigner, who was on this committee with us, said he couldn't remember when we were under budget. So, yay. Another very positive comment that was made at this meeting is that, and I want to highlight this because I believe it's really important for the community to hear this, is that our RACSB people are working very, very well with the school division, folks, and we have over 250 people, teachers, assistant principals, counselors, I believe even bus drivers, and also the principals that have been trained on a new program called Mental Health for Youth and the Part 1 of the ACEs program. And ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So they're now able to identify students that have mental health challenges, and they're tracking how they're doing, their rates, and their outcomes. And I just want to give some kudos to Wendy Martin Johnson, who's head of special ed for the school division, because I feel like she's really making a difference and working with Donna Kraus and her team. Two more things, and then I'm done. At GWRC last night, we approved a regional complete count committee for the census, which will work in tandem with our Stafford County Committee when we approve that. And we also approved moving forward with a finance committee that will bring some recommendations back to the full GWRC board. Lastly, Keith Dayton attended his last R board meeting with us last week. The big focus is on when we're going to be filling up cell F2. Currently, we've filled up 59% of our airspace there. And the trajectory is that we'll probably have that filled by the fall of 2020. We'll have more information on that because they're doing a flyover July 1. So we'll be getting additional information on our capacity at our next R board meeting. If you're interested in the hazardous waste collection, it's going to be on July 20th. The location is to be determined. And the last thing, Mr. Chairman, is I'd like to pull item number 18.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cavalier.
Just one thing, I'll be quick. Broadband, it was very disappointing to hear we didn't get the broadband grant that we were seeking from the state. And I don't want to see that initiative die, though, because I think in particular from where we were talking about it originating, which was down in King George, if we could come along the same route and take it through basically the entire eastern part of Stafford County along the river, I think shooting line of sight over the air there would enable that particular, those areas which are all underserved for high-speed internet currently, to be able to have some access. And I think it's at a minimal cost that we could do all this, but I really think we need to re-energize this this whole process again that we started. Ms. Shelton worked on it extensively, but I just don't want to see it die because we didn't get the grant. The plan from the beginning was we would have a plan B if we didn't get the grant. And so let's see the plan B, let's get it moving, let's get talking about it. We're going to have to earmark some money at some point to make this happen, but it's a worthwhile effort that's going to get a lot of people in this county some high-speed internet that they currently do not have. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you very much. First of all, for anyone that, Lynn from VDOT, as we were walking out with the students, leaned over and told me that it is on their plan to cut back that vegetation tomorrow morning. So these students had a great impact because apparently it went from sometime this week to sometime tomorrow morning, which is good. I too am very proud of the students and their activism in that. Just a quick update, Public Safety Committee. We had an update on the School Safety Task Force, which Mr. Cavalier was instrumental in trying to get pushed through. The sheriff has been working very diligently on this with all the members of that task force. The bus drivers in the school system will be getting active shooter training this summer as part of the way they're going through all the employees of the school system to get them prepared. The fire chief brought forward a new emergency medical dispatch system, which is far more modern and up-to-date and specific, and it will give when you call in, you will be able to give information that will actually help them assign and know specifically which vehicles or what services you need to help with your emergency. So, and it will be tied in with our Sheriff's Department, which is excellent. So it's a really great innovation for our system. Also, it was the sheriff informed us that all 3 elementary schools will have a school protection officer this upcoming school year. So the program that was instituted last year, again, Mr. Cavalier and our committee last year were pushing this, is actually going to come to fruition very quickly. So we thank the sheriff for his work on that. Just a quick note of appreciation. Thank you.
Mr. Dunapper.
"15 years ago, on the 18th of May, which was just a couple of days ago, I stood at that very podium, tears running down my face, with the same exact message that they had. It brings tears to my eyes. My wife was there with me. She followed me and spoke. There was a room full of Colonial Forge students there that night, and also a large number of my family and friends who were there. And we came back week after meeting after meeting, meeting after meeting, and I followed those young people out there into the hall, and that's what I told them. You need to keep coming back and be the conscience of this board. Over the next several weeks, we'll be talking about trying to come up with funding that we don't have right now and planning for improvements that we don't have planned right now. So I've asked them to please come back every meeting and be the conscience of this board. It's important in the future, and I really never thought or hoped that I'd be on this side when this happened and those young kids came up. I know how bad they're hurting. I know how bad their family is hurting, and it's deep. It goes very deep. And you had a handful of them here, but I guarantee you there are hundreds of kids at Colonial Forge right now that are deeply affected by what occurred. I've had several mothers call me in the last few days who told me they won't let their 17-year-old son drive on Stafford County roads to and from school. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves for having that kind of situation, especially when we don't even have a plan moving forward. We're just kind of wallowing in our whatever. Short of wanting to keep this totally somber, I received an email on Friday from Mr. Jeff Pence, who is the son of the CEO, I guess, of the Pence Group, who relayed to me a discussion he had with the Regal Cinema that's out there, and they are preparing a press release. They've given me permission to make this announcement, but they're preparing a press release which they think they'll have out by the end of the week. That states basically Regal is looking forward to bringing their state-of-the-art Cineworld theater experience to Stafford. If someone asks what it is, it would just say it will be the high-end theater, and we'll know more specific shortly. I posted this on my Facebook page. If anyone wants to follow, I try and keep the most up-to-date and latest information that's there that is absolutely accurate. It's been almost comical, some of the remarks that I've received on that. We can be pessimistic to the end, but we're going to get this thing built. I think my question after receiving this email was, when are we going to start construction? And the answer was, we have a few loose ends, but we're going to start soon. I'll remind everyone, the public, that this family has invested $18 million into this site, into this project, You don't walk away from $18 million and not get, at least get started. So I'm anticipating it starting. I know I've said that before, and I've had to eat those words as we go through. Unfortunately, I don't have absolute control of what can happen. It's a private business. I can only facilitate as best that I can, and I've tried doing that with them. I think they recognize that Stafford County has been involved in that. A lot of changes in the market have created this slowdown, but we're going to have a state-of-the-art movie theater in Stafford County once construction starts here, and it's going to come pretty soon. So thank you.
Ms. Shelton?
Bravo, Mr. Dudenheffer. I'm glad that you brought some good news to today's meeting, and I'm really proud that we can finally move forward with that. And Mr. Cavalier, there's two things that a quiet district really cares about, and these are the priorities that I committed to work on. One of them you just mentioned is broadband. So I agree that we as a board should address that from a county-wide perspective on what that Plan B should be, and I will help in whatever way that is. The second thing that we've all talked about today in very sad circumstances has to do with our road projects. Let's go back to that. I am 100% committed to doing what we need to do to correct the roads. One of the things that I was going to mention is that I went to a Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting down in Fredericksburg and talked to Secretary Valentine about things that we need to do and what we can do as a county, and not just as a county, but within FAMPO, the Fredericksburg Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, what we can do to be able to tee ourselves up for success in the future. As you know, or if you don't know, that the General Assembly asked VDOT to do another I-95 study. Yes, I'm sick of studies too. But do another study looking at alternative courses of action rather than going down I-95. And I talked to the chief engineer about that. One of the things that he brought to my attention, and those that goes to the roundtable already know, we've been talking about it, is bringing back that concept of the outer connector. I know that's a very negative connotation to some people that have been here a long time, but we're never going to, I mean, we're just going to continue to grow. We know that we're going to do that. If we'd done this 20 years ago, we wouldn't have the problem we do now. And so I think it's time that we bring back to the board and have that conversation. And so I don't know where that's going to occur, but I want to encourage us as a board to go look at that as an option. Because one of the things that Secretary Valentine told me, that if we, the board and FAMPO, do not have it on our radar, they won't. And so they won't have that consideration. And so there's been other things that have been funded that we didn't plan on, that were funded simply because it was on a plan somewhere, even if it was on a plan that had no funding. But setting that aside, let's go back to our road study. We spent a year studying the roads, the secondary roads in Stafford County, and we know that VDOT does not have the funds to be able to support it. There are a lot of us that we believe that our tax dollars should pay for that. But when you go look at how much money it takes for these road segments, I don't want to continue to listen. I don't want to see another story like this. And so I encourage us as a board to take very positive action, and we are, in the next couple of weeks as we look at how we're going to fund our transportation projects and look for those alternatives. And I want to thank staff because I know behind the scenes you guys are doing a lot to very creative thinking on ways to bring back to us that we can fund this in such a way that we don't have to wait another 20 years. I'm not talking about the outer connector. I'm really talking about the secondary road project. And I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, and I'm sad that this didn't happen 2 years ago. But we're where we are today. Let's move forward. Thank you, sir. I'm finished with my comments.
Mr. Snellings?
Defer. Report of the county attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no report at this time.
Mr. Chairman, we just have the construction report. That's the only thing for today. And Brian Council with Public Works will give that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Brian Council, Deputy Director of Public Works for Capital Engineering and Construction. Collection of specific projects today to bring you up to date on the progress. First one on the list is the Fire Station 14. Doesn't seem to,
Computer, please.
it's not advancing. Cheryl, can you just advance it to the first slide? Fire Station 14, couple of notes on that. The brick veneer is almost complete. The building is made of combination of brick and some metal siding. As you can see from some of the pictures, the two-story gable roof, which is where the large apparatus will be, is yet to have its skin put on yet, but it's coming pretty soon. But the brick on the rest of the part of the building is coming along very nicely. There's also significant interior work underway that you can't see from these particular pictures, but a lot of the HVAC is in, a lot of the what we call CMU block walls are in. A lot of work in these pictures that you can't see is underway. Also, the site is beginning to dry up from a year-long period of constant rain. Some of the positive effects of that is some of the underground water collection and storage is going to be taking place here pretty soon. We're meeting with the contractor regularly. We're confident that they believe they can finish at the end of July. Poplar Road and Mountain View Road, this is the last phase of the improvement scheduled for Poplar Road. The notice to proceed to start that work occurred this week, so we should start seeing some clearing on both sides of the road out there in the coming days. Brook Road safety improvements. We extended the road closure to summer of 19 into July 19. After repeated meetings with the contractor, we're confident that that is scheduled to open by the end of July. The picture you see on the report there, if you head southbound on Brook Road and you're getting ready to go up the hill, that's over to the right. You can see the new roadway alignment is being rough graded. But when this picture was taken, was a couple of 3 weeks ago. They're doing some fine grading on that now, and they've got some relocation of some utilities that weren't accessible before. Going to be relocated. Dominion and Verizon are out there now. That was the critical part that needed to happen to make sure we could get this open. So those are taking place now. Route 1 Courthouse Road intersection improvements. It's squarely in the right-of-way phase right now, where staff is working with our consultant and all the property owners that are impacted to acquire all the necessary property. That is moving along. We're scheduled to start utility relocations this summer. Belmont Ferry Farm Trail Phase 4. Work, as you may know, is resumed out there. There have been a number of culverts put in, a road crossing of River Road has been put in, and that project is on schedule. Belmont Ferry Farm Trail Phase 6, a little bit different story. As you guys are aware, the board approved a termination a few months ago, and we're working through several different options, complicated options to get the trail from Route 3, the Route 3 bridge intersection, to the Cool Springs Road. We're looking to hopefully finalize some of those decisions in the next short period of time, a few weeks, to get something finalized for that. Juggins Road improvements, on schedule. The project is not impeding any progress of the school construction. That is, well, it's on schedule. Berea Church Road safety improvements, same thing. It's in the right-of-way acquisition process, and it's currently on schedule. Route 1 Woodstock, there is a consent item agenda on today's schedule to consider the roadway scenario that we presented at Infrastructure Committee a while back, reverting back to the original smart scale application scenario for the roadway alignment. Route 1 Enon Road improvements. When this report was written a couple of weeks or a little more than a week ago, there have been some dramatic changes in the way this project is funded for the good. The new funding strategy, that the breakdown is local funds, 1.55 million, which is revenue sharing that's been on the project for a while, and then smart scale of 4.2 and RSTP CMAQ of 4.8 for a full funding of 10.6 for the full scope of work. So,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Council, when is CTB's meeting in June? Because that's really the final, when they vote on it, correct?
I believe that's correct. The meeting and talking with FAMPO and VDOT, they're not indicating that there will be any issues with that, but as you point out, it is restricted to that vote.
Right, so do you know when that meeting is in June?
I do not off the top of my head.
Okay,
no, ma'am.
all right, I'll look it up. All right, thank you.
We'd be happy to provide that to you if you would like us to. Switching from transportation to some of the water and sewer improvements going on, Claiborne Run Sewer Interceptor, which is, made mention of this before, it's between Wawa on Butler Road and the Earl's True Value hardware store. All the mainline pipe is in. We're working through some very complicated tributary pipes that connect to that larger line. That project was scheduled to complete last month. It was affected due to weather. We're working with the contractor now to address any time extensions necessary and how long that may take. We are confident that it will be sometime in June or at the latest July when that project will complete. The next slide has a typo on it. It's not just the Lower Accokeek pump station project, but it's the all-encompassing Lower Accokeek project there. The updates are pertaining to that, but we have an update on that we had to rebid the pipeline project, and it's currently back out on the street for a closure on June 12th, I believe. We'll be coming back to the board for consideration of a construction contract, hopefully the first meeting in July. The Route 1 Wayside Sewer Interceptor, most of the work, other than just a little bit up on Route 1 where we're going to bore under Route 1 northbound lanes, all the pipeline is in, and some of that project will start the restoration process. 50% of the work still remains on the east side of Route 1 in the Alatoona neighborhood there, and so that work is going to start over in the neighborhood in the next couple of weeks. This is not on the report, but just an update on the lane closure that's on Route 3 eastbound, just past Walmart. That lane closure is still in place. The reason for that is the contractor is looking for a leak in the pipe. We do a pressure test on all pipe to make sure it's going to hold what it's supposed to hold. And they're detecting a leak, or they're getting acknowledgement of a leak that they're trying to find it. I talked to some people today. They think they found it. They're digging on it right now. So we hope to have that lane closure picked up very, very soon.
Any questions for Mr. Council? Could you provide the board, each board member, with a list, with a list of all the road projects that are currently underway and that have been completed in the past? I guess this is probably as a result of the 2008 bond referendum. I know there's a lot of projects that have been completed, and you just listed about 6 that are currently under construction. And we're going to get questions, obviously. So if you could provide that list to us, I think it would help us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, happy to do that. The ones that are listed today were ones that are either in the design right-of-way phase or construction phase.
Correct.
And there are some that are on the CIP currently that have not started any phase yet, and plus the ones that have finished as part of that, I think it was 2008 bond referendum. We'll certainly put together a list and
Thank you.
show the progress on those.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
Anything else, Mark? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, do I have a motion for the consent agenda less item 18?
Second.
A motion and a second. Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion carries 6-0 with 1 absent. Ms. Bomke, item 18.
Yes, I just didn't want item 18 to be approved on the consent agenda when we have something so exciting that is hopefully going to happen in Stafford County. And we have Minnie and John Leitner here and Price Jett. And this is just a phenomenal story that I know James Barron from the Freelance Star is going to write about. And I wanted to give Mr. Cohen the opportunity to make the motion to approve this item and then add any comments that he might have.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion for R19-165 to have a public hearing for the Tribal Center on June 4th Just double checking.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, we will be working through the lease back and forth, and so we're going to
Okay.
schedule this for the 4th. If there should be a delay, it will go to the 18th and can be completely approved by the 18th at the
Okay.
latest.
And it's just, this is a great opportunity for the county. The Potomac tribe has been working on this for many, many years, and it's really been something that I think Price and I met in December of last year and talked about trying to get this moving. And so basically, not even 6 months, we've moved along to this point. I thank the staff for their work on this. I thank the other board members for their support of this. I think it's an important element of our county to take pride of the people who have been living here the longest and are such a vital element to our county. And so we'll move for R 19-165.
I have a motion, Ms. Baumke, I assume you're seconding.
Sure, second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absent. Congratulations, it's going to happen.
Yay.
Item number 20, unfinished business, economic development and tourism. Authorize the county administrator to execute a contract renewal for economic development and tourism marketing services. Proposed resolution R19-137. Mr.
So
Holden.
move. Oh. Okay.
Chair, Board, this item was pulled during the last meeting, and I've subsequently spoke with Supervisor Baumke on the matter. Just a brief update, only one slide. This contract is for the calendar year 2019 to focus on marketing primarily out of our office for tourism, not exclusively, but primarily for our tourism efforts. It is less than the previous 2 calendar years by $15,000. And it's for specific services that we do not have staff capacity to take care of, primarily around the technical side of advertisement placement, media, radio, et cetera. So I'd be glad to take any questions if there are.
Any questions for Mr. Holden? Thank you, sir. Do I hear a motion?
So move.
I have a motion by Ms. Baumke. Anyone second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Shelton. Any discussion?
Yeah, I would just like to say I appreciate Mr. Holden's comments and where he's going with this, and he helped on some of the technical questions that I had.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absent. New business. County Administration discussion of unsolicited proposal for the courthouse construction project using the Public-Private Education and Infrastructure Act. Mr. Smith.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you all know, we did receive an unsolicited proposal for the design, construction, and renovation of the courthouse. According to the board's policy, the board must determine if they would like to proceed with the PPEA process or move forward with a standard Virginia Public Procurement Act design bid build process. We developed a staff team to review the unsolicited proposal. The team consisted of staff from our construction office, our county attorney's office, the procurement office, and county administration. We reviewed the proposal and found that it generally met all the policy requirements. The team felt it was important to understand the benefits of the PPEA over the VPPA as we went through the process before we made a recommendation. Generally, the benefit touted by those that are proponents of the PPEA is that it is an accelerated timeline, that you can begin the construction at the same time you're doing the design. However, it is also a complicated process where you have to have an agreement before you begin the design or the construction, and that agreement includes everything throughout the design, including the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment in the design, and in a courthouse that can be quite expensive. So there is a certain amount of risk on the county at the outset, and so you have to make sure that that agreement is well thought out, and that is a timely process that most of the people we talked to said takes between 18 and 24 months to get that done right. So when you add that time in, the time that you gain by not going out for an RFP to bid for both the design and construction, it kind of shrinks that timeline. So we did a comprehensive look at the timeline for both products, for both processes, and we came up with an end date that's pretty much the same thing. So we didn't see any benefit from time, so we wanted to see what other benefits there might be. So we spoke to Spotsylvania, Buchanan, and Fredericksburg. And in Spotsylvania, they built their courthouse. However, there's nobody still there that was there at the time of the courthouse, and they said they'd have no plans to use the PPEA anytime in the future. They didn't have specifics on why, they just don't plan to use it. Buchanan said they were generally happy with the PPEA, mostly because they could just turn everything over to the contractor and not have to worry about it. But they did have a few issues with timing, and the cost did go up as they went through the process. Fredericksburg also has no one left that did the PPEA, but they were generally happy, although they did have issues with the timelines, because when you set up your agreement, one of the agreement's stipulations is that the county will review and approve submissions in a certain amount of time. In the most recent offer, they had a 14-day timeline where it would come into the county and it would get through our planning review process, which means we would have to put that in front of any of our commercial processes that are, or any commercial plans that are in. So that's something that concerned us. Also, as I mentioned, you have to plan everything out from the very beginning in that comprehensive agreement, and that adds risk to the county because in a courthouse design, it's pretty complicated, and we'll probably get a lot of input from the users and want to make sure that we incorporate their thoughts. So as I mentioned, with both timelines, the courthouse completion and renovation would be finished around December of 2024 as we went through the process for both the PPEA or the VPPA. So we didn't get any added benefit there because the PPEA process is so slow down in the front end. So the staff would recommend that we move forward with the traditional Virginia Public Procurement Act and do a RFP for design, complete the design, and then do an RFP for construction, so that when we do go to the construction, we know fully what we are expecting to get to. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Smith? And no action is required today because this is new business.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Item number 22, Planning and Zoning. Authorize a resolution to refer to the Planning Commission the use of, let's talk beehives, in residential and planned development districts, proposed resolution R19-163. Mr. Harvey.
Good afternoon, Chairman Snellings and board members. I'm Jeff Harvey, the Director of Planning and Zoning. This is an item that was discussed at the May 7th Community and Economic Development Committee. Several of you have received inquiries from residents in the county that live in residential or planned development zone neighborhoods and have asked to be permitted to keep bees in beehives. Currently, our zoning ordinance only allows keeping of beehives in our agricultural zones. We've looked at what some of our surrounding communities are doing, and they are now allowing them in residential zones under certain limitations and conditions. The resolution that the chairman mentioned would refer this issue to the Planning Commission for consideration to be added to the zoning ordinance. Some initial draft recommendations are that this would be permitted on lots that are at least 10,000 square feet in size. They could have up to 4 beehives on a lot of that size, and they could have additional beehives based on a proportionate increase in the square footage of the lot. There's some other requirements with regard to ensuring that there's a water source on the property to sustain the bees, and also measures to protect neighbors for the bee swarms that occur with the hives. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may
Any
have.
questions for Mr. Harvey? Ms. Baumke?
So when you refer to a beehive, and I've seen these before, a friend of mine has some, are you referring to one of the cases with all the different shelves in there is one beehive?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Dudenheffer?
I don't have any questions for Jeff. I just, I guess for discussion, I'd like to move for R19-163, which just refers the item to the Planning Commission for review.
Can we vote on this tonight? It's new business.
Mr. Chairman, this is new business. The board would have to deem it time sensitive to take it up today.
Oh, okay, then we don't need to do it. It's not time sensitive.
Anybody else? Any other questions, Mr. Cavalier?
All I can say is this will end up being a very sticky situation.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we do not have closed meeting this evening, so we are in recess until 7 p.m. This time, I'd like everyone to stand. Mr. Dudenheffer will conduct the prayer, and I will lead you in the pledge.
Lord, we meet to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognize our responsibility to the past and the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. We ask especially, Father, this day that Thy Spirit be with all those who are suffering from the loss of Helen Wang, I forgot her last name, Wang, and that they will feel peace and love and know that she is in a better place, Father. May we act wisely and well, and these things we pray in Thy name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It is so good to see a full house. If we want to balance the budget, we might want to start charging. Actually, we'd never do that. I see Delegate Bob Thomas is in the back, and he's going to come forward and give us a legislative update on what took place in Richmond during this last session. So, Delegate Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the board. It's really good to be with you for my annual update of the legislative session. It was certainly a wild ride in Richmond, but I'm here to talk about a lot of the issues that we tackled and some that we maybe didn't and things we might do in the future. Obviously, the big issue in Richmond this year was the budget with federal tax conformity. So when there were federal tax laws passed up in D.C., it had an unintended consequence here in Virginia. As many of you know, Commissioner of the Revenue, Scott Majowski, and I were down there last year trying to point out this problem, but we finally found a solution this year. The main issue was at the federal level, they doubled the standard deduction. So millions of Americans would do better taking the standard deduction. But the problem is the Virginia code is set up to where if you standardize at the federal level, you have to also do so at the state level. So what that meant was there was going to be about $1 billion over the 2-year budget coming into the Commonwealth. And if we chose to do nothing, there'd be $1 billion that needed to be spent. So we chose to actually return the money to the taxpayers. I, of course, preferred the House version of that bill. What that would have done is decoupled. So if you decided to standardize it to federal, we would let you still itemize at the state and would pretty much keep your tax return exactly the same as it was this year. In order to do that and make it effective for this year, as Mr. Dudenheffer knows, it's an emergency legislation and you need 80 votes out of 100. We had a lot of Democrats that voted for that, but unfortunately we didn't quite have 80. So we went to the Senate version. Theirs was a little bit more conservative on the revenue estimates, and we're watching the numbers come in right now, and they're coming in on target. And as long as those numbers match the revenue that I spoke about earlier, at the end of the year, around the October timeframe, every taxpayer will get a rebate check. It'll be about $110 for individuals, $220 for married couples. And then for next year, we have increased the standard deduction by 50%. So as an individual, you used to take the first $3,000 was tax-free, now it'll be $4,500. For married couples, it used to be $6,000, now it'll be $9,000. So that'll be for next year. And we're hoping that'll be pretty close to where the number should have been, around zero. For the second year in a row, I'm really happy to report that we put lottery money in education, and we didn't take it out the other end. We talked about that last year. It was the first time in many years lottery money was added to K-12 and left there. So that's a good trend that we hope continues. As you know, we provided a 2% pay raise for the state SOQ positions. But one of the things I was really happy we did this year, because as you know, we don't cover all the positions that you employ here in Stafford County. We sent it with no strings attached. So what that meant is you could either give 2% to the state employees and add 2% for your own, or you could spread it across all the employees. And as long as I'm there, we'll continue to try to make sure that those funds come with no strings. There's additional broadband funding in the budget this year. I know we had a grant that we applied for over in Marlboro Point that didn't quite get funded, but next year there's going to be, I think, about 6 times the amount of funding in there, so hopefully we'll have some progress on that. One of the things that a lot of the local higher institutions of learning have opted to do, we put money in the budget so any state-sponsored school could hold tuition flat. We found out a couple days ago that Germanna has decided to do that, so they're going to hold tuition flat, and University of Mary Washington as well. And then one of the other things that was important to Stafford County was the funding of the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. We added about a 20% bump across the state to those because we're way behind on that funding. So that was the highlights of the budget. I would say that it was a pretty good year for local government. Last year, there was a lot of really bad local government bills I was running around fighting against. This year, there was 1 or 2, and I think we managed to keep them all at bay, and I think the governor vetoed the one that slipped through the cracks. So I think for the first year in many, it was a really good year for local government. A couple of the bills that I carried on your behalf, one was the proffer bill, and I have to thank Rashida. Up until the moment I had to hit submit at the last second there before it went in, Rashida and I were on the phone working on the language to make sure that the needs of local government, specifically Stafford and Fredericksburg, were met. So I just wanted to thank her publicly for that. And as I had questions coming from all around the state, I was able to get her on the phone every single time and make sure that we had the bill right. So I saw a lot of bills go down this year because the word unfunded mandate came up. I think maybe people are finally paying attention to how that really does hurt the local governments. So a lot of those bills were able to be defeated. One that is a concern, though, is these constitutional amendments that keep showing up on the ballot. As you know, I think it's about 3% of your revenue now is going to the constitutional amendment for property tax exemption. So there's a constitutional amendment that if it passes again next year will be on the ballot in next November. And what it says is currently localities are authorized, if they choose, to exempt one vehicle for 100% disabled veteran. The bill on the House side would have just put that in the Constitution and left it optional. Unfortunately, the bill on the Senate side came over, and when it went to conference, they made it a mandatory thing. They did not mention it on the floor, as Mr. Dudenheffer knows. That's kind of where some of these bills can go awry. So we had quite a hefty debate on the floor about perhaps since everybody in the state has voted to make this mandatory, you have a voter in Scott County who's making, Stafford County Board do this, that after you exceed 1% of revenue, perhaps the state should try to step in and help with that burden, because I know that would help you guys. Hampton Roads is also highly affected on that. So that's something I'm going to continue to push for next year, and we did have that debate on the floor, so all the delegates are aware of this problem. We did have a couple of veterans bills that we got passed. One is if they're an active duty service member and they're operating a heavy vehicle now, we're going to cut the red tape and give them a CDL and hopefully keep them here in the Virginia workforce. And then the other one was we discovered that it's really hard on the active duty spouse to maintain a career, especially in professional career, as they move around the country every 2 to 3 years. So if you have a spouse who's a physician's assistant, when they get here to Virginia, we're going to cut the red tape. As long as they don't have anything on the record, we're going to make them a physician's assistant by letter. So we're hoping to become even more veteran-friendly here in Stafford. I had the broadband bill that was actually an idea, I think, that we kind of percolated here, and then it fell off of your priorities. We went ahead and passed that bill. So what that basically says is you can use your service district authority. So if you think about the dam projects we've had, dam being body of water, where you can basically take money out of reserve, fix the problem, and then get the money back from the taxpayers who benefit. You could do the same thing now with a broadband project. So I've had several localities around the state already calling me to say, how does that work? So I'm going to go to Richmond and give a talk on that very soon. So thank you for the idea. I think Cindy had that idea, and we just went ahead and ran with it anyway, even though it dropped off your radar. The last thing really is transportation. That's, as you guys know, that's the issue here. That's the issue I work on the most down in Richmond. Last year, when we had the Metro funding bill, one of the things we said is they had to start using the dollars that go to transit, so that's rail and bus service, they had to score that similar to Smart Scale. Well, they came up with a score, and the problem is it really hurt PRTC, which Stafford is a member of. One of the problems we have is we drive all the way up to DC full, and then we come back empty. Well, that score was hurting us. It was going to cost PRTC about $800,000. So I had a bill that got submitted, and we allowed DRPT to use reserve funding this year while they fix that formula, so there's no bus cut service because of that bill. There was a couple of Smart Scale bills that came through that really would have hurt. Somebody thought it would be a good idea to give extra credit to a project if you're on a hurricane evacuation route, which basically means every other project in the state automatically gets a 0 for that category. So once we explained the effects of that bill, we were able to defeat that bill. Two bills that you'll probably really be interested in. One is we have an I-95 study coming in. Right now, there's about $1 billion going into the corridor. So for the next 3.5 years, you're going to see a lot of orange cones, new bridges going over the Rappahannock. But if DC ever comes up with an infrastructure plan and says, hey, we have another $1 billion, what are you going to do with it? Right now, we wouldn't have a plan for it on 95. So Delegate Cole submitted that bill, and as Mr. Dudenheffer knows, it's hard to get studies approved. They only approve 1 or 2 of those a year because it takes a lot of money and staff time to do it. So we were very happy to see that VDOT took that on. The other study that was kind of buried in the budget is the gas tax. As we get more hybrids and electric vehicles, the gas tax is a waning source of revenue. So we've charged VDOT to go look at that, see what other states are doing, how we might approach that, and we need to get ahead of it before it's too late. So those are 2 studies we'll be looking for. And the last big transportation thing, we had an I-81 bill that started out as a tolling bill when we first got to Richmond in January. By the time we left session, we decided to study it for 1 more year because we weren't quite sure that tolling an existing road was going to pass. I personally have a problem with tolling roads that the taxpayers have already built. So when we came back for the reconvene session, the governor had put it in the budget. And what it does is it basically brings the truck tax up to about the average on the corridor up and down 95. And it also adds the 2.1 motor fuels tax that we have as being part of PRTC. It adds that to the whole corridor for I-81. The difference is you and I, we get to use that money for whatever projects we want or for VRE. On 81, they're going to pay that, but it has to be used on Interstate 81. So they're going to be able to bond about $1.5 billion worth of projects and try to fix 81. So it kind of does help Interstate 95. In the first year, it'll generate about $18 million, the second year, $27 million, and by the third year, it'll be $39.5 million in perpetuity that has to be used on the 95 corridor from our northern county border to North Carolina. So there's going to be a scoring process for that money as well. I think the silver lining there is if we can try to use less smart scale dollars for the interstates, we can actually start fixing some of our side road problems. I don't think that's more evident than this week that we certainly need to do that. I know that's why Mr. Dudenheffer serves. So hopefully we can see a lot more of that smart scale money be used for your local projects based on that. There's actually a second pot of money that is about $42 million that gets used on all the interstates. So we'll be able to compete somewhere for around $60 to $80 million a year for projects on the interstate. Lastly, I just wanted to say that I had a lot of those different bills, and every constitutional officer was in Richmond several times, from the Commissioner of the Revenue. The treasurer was there helping us navigate a couple of bills. The clerk of the court, there was 1 or 2 that came up over there. Eric Olson, actually, I didn't realize it until I got there last year, has 2 people from his office that are down there all the time looking at these bills, so it was very good to have them there. And as you know, the sheriff came down. We had a school protection officer bill that we fought for very hard. It was vetoed, so we're working on some tweaks to that, and we hope, to increase school safety next year, because that's certainly a focus of ours. But that's a brief version of what went on in Richmond. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Thomas. Any questions? Mr. Dudenheffer.
Hey, Bob, you said my name 5 times. And
I missed you down
I
there.
want to thank you for that.
Are you up for re-election?
I may never be up for re-election. Last night we were at FAMPO, and they are working on, with Mary Washington, a simulation type model we obviously haven't done well in the last couple rounds of smart scale, which is frustrating because we're not addressing the same issues that we had all those high school kids in. earlier today. So have you looked at that? Is that something you think will be helpful, or will it help you in any way?
Yeah, actually, I believe it's Chris Garcia is probably the professor you're working with. Last year, I partnered with the Chamber of Commerce, Fredericksburg Regional Alliance, and the university, and we said, let's go look at the scoring criteria and run all the projects through and make sure that they actually scored them correctly, because if they're not doing that, then we don't know where to start as far as changes in Smart Scale. Very happy to report there was very little discrepancies in any of the projects. They were all within the margin of error. So he was able to do a lot of good work last year and help us figure out. So I think a logical extension of that is now that he knows how to plug the projects in, he might be able to help you maybe predict which projects will do better and which ones won't, now that we're limited to the number of projects we can submit. So I think it would be helpful. The only missing data point, you're not going to know what everybody else is submitting.
Right.
So I'm not really sure if I can help, in my day job, I do a lot of data
And
analytics and
it
stuff.
was brought up by Matt Kelly that we, in this case, we may be playing to the results as opposed to submitting the projects that we need.
Right. Yeah, there's always a risk of curve fitting. That's what we call it
Right.
in the data world. I will say that Prince William apparently got 0 for road projects, so we're not the only ones that are not figuring this out. One of the things we were looking at last year is, are they counting weekend traffic correctly? Because the northbound river crossing barely even showed up on the radar. And it took about 18 months for them to tell us how they were actually scoring the traffic counts. And it turns out that they're using the 30th busiest hour, no matter what that happens to be. So if by chance your 30th hour is on a weekend, well, they'll use that. So the Secretary of Transportation, we met with them, with the Chamber, and they've committed in writing to run the models. And what they're probably going to do is use a blended system, where they might take the busiest, the 30th, the 100th, and maybe the 500th, and blend that together. So maybe the projects will actually be compared a little bit easier. The problem is none of that is in the actual code of Virginia. So it's very hard to submit a bill and say you have to do this, because the CTB actually does it. So I think we finally figured out the correct way to try to do that. One of the other things we're looking at, and I believe FAMPO is also looking at, is there's 4 categories of areas, A, B, C, and D. When they first came out with Smart Scale, Richmond thought maybe we should lump ourselves in with Richmond, but at the time, we weren't really sure what that meant, so we asked to be lumped in with Northern Virginia. So I think looking at whether we should go ahead and ask to be moved back to Richmond might benefit our projects. And again, Chris can run the projects and tell us how they would have scored the first couple of rounds. So I think we'll be making a smart, informed decision if we just, go slowly and use data before I go asking for a change that maybe hurts us.
Well, I'm glad they put you on county, cities, and towns. I fought for that for a long time. I finally convinced the speaker when I left that we needed somebody with local government experience on that committee, and I think you've represented us well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions for Delegate Thomas? Thank you very much, Delegate Thomas. Delegate Thomas served 6 years on this board. I had the honor and privilege to serve with him. I also see 2 other former board members here, Mr. Phil Horning, who's in the back, and Ms. Becky Reed, who represented Falmouth, I believe, for 8 years. So welcome tonight. Before we move forward, I'm going to make a quick announcement. The entrance to Able Lake on Kellogg Mill Road has been closed until further notice. That was a vote by the board this afternoon due to the horrific accident we had there last Thursday. So that will be closed until it can be brought up to safety standards. This time, I'm proud to introduce Ms. Jane Connor. Jane. Jane is chairman of the Stafford County Historical Commission, and she is here tonight to present Historic Preservation Awards to some of our citizens. Could I ask someone in the back on staff to crank that air conditioner up? It's a little warm in here.
You'll be later. You'll be coming up later.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. You'll be over here.
Okay.
Beata, you'll be there. You'll be over here. Right there. It's great. Do we have any Sergeant Major Ross here, or a, can you all hear me? or Sergeant Razor. Yes, if you could come up, please. Over there. Well, as our chairman said, I am Jane Connor, and I'm the chairman of the Stafford County Historical Commission. And every year in May, we present awards to people who have contributed to our history in Stafford County. We're so fortunate because Stafford County has both national and local history that is of such importance. We have Captain John Smith, Pocahontas, George Washington, George Mason, Moncure Conway, Anthony Burns. We have so many people here in Stafford who have contributed so much to our history. And today, we're going to present awards to people who have done so much to preserve our history in Stafford County. So the first person that I would like to present an award with is Beata Jensen. Beata, and I have 2 minutes per person, so I'm reading this. Beata, and I could go on with Beata for a long time. Beata has been working for 20 years to preserve Belmont, the 18th century property in South Stafford that was home to the Impressionist painter Gary Melcher. She is the cultural resource manager, and her mission has been to provide faithful representation of the 27-acre site coinciding with the period of Gary and Corinne Melcher's residence there. Under her stewardship and in partnership with other organizations, Beata has safeguarded the historic integrity of the property, developed and implemented a prioritized plan for practical and appropriate restoration where needed, and provided engaging educational and interpretive experiences. She extensively researched the history of the property and its site design for restoration and improvements. She also supervises a maintenance program of tree pruning, feeding, and disease prevention, and created a wildlife habitat. And if you haven't been to Belmont, you have to go, not only to look at the work of our wonderful Gary Melchers, but also to see the wonderful work that you have done there. It's just exquisite. And the next people I'm going to present this is John and Kathy Harris, and they are to be recognized for their preservation of the Latham Beckham Family Cemetery located off of Hartwood Road. Where is our supervisor there? The cemetery includes many unmarked graves, but there is one grave marker for Emmeline J. Beckham, who departed life in 1842, and she was only 2 years of age. The cemetery had been neglected and overgrown, but John and Kathy Harris cleaned up the cemetery to ensure better maintenance of the site and repaired the marker for little Emmeline, and which had broken in half. The cemetery is on the historic Spada Tavern Farm property owned by the Harris family, which is protected by the conservation easement and is part of Stafford's purchase of development rights program. So we thank you so much for that. I don't believe that Sherry Cooper or William Shelton are here. Perhaps we can bring them back at another time to give. Oh, okay, good. I'm glad you're here. Okay, this is William G. Shelton III. I'll tell you a little bit about them. They also did work in preserving a cemetery in Stafford County. Sherry Cooper is to be recognized for her research, discovery, and preservation of the Staples Family Cemetery off of Brook Road. The cemetery is the resting place of Civil War veteran Peleg S. Staples. He was born in 1844 and he died in 1917, and several other family members, including children. Sherry searched records online and also here at Stafford County Courthouse for family members that were thought to be buried in Stafford County, and her discoveries led to finding the Staples Cemetery. In 2018, a ceremony was held to commemorate those buried in the cemetery, and 3 headstones were placed to mark the sites. Now, William was instrumental in the preservation efforts, which included making one of the headstones and setting 3 headstones in the cemetery. So thank you so much. Now, the 2 gentlemen to my left are Frank White and Norman Schools. They placed at the Bethlehem Primitive Baptist Church and Cemetery, they placed this site on the National Register of Historic Places as well as the Virginia Landmarks Registry in 2018. They also had a VDOT highway marker placed at the site. Bethlehem Primitive Baptist Church and its cemetery were founded in 1870 in Stafford County by formerly enslaved African Americans under the auspices of a benevolent organization working with the Freedmen's Bureau. The church and cemetery are significant to the history and growth of the Black community in the White Oak area after the Civil War and through the eras of Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and civil rights. The cemetery marks a turning point for African Americans who could then bury community members in the sanctioned burial ground during funerals officiated by a Black pastor instead of a white one, as the law required before the Civil War. And these 2 gentlemen not only placed this on the National Register and the Virginia Register, but they also did it for the Rouser Building on Highway 1. So we have so much to be thankful for both of you. Now, the last award is for the Stafford Community Service Crew. So are you First Sergeant Ross or are you Sergeant Razor? Okay. Well, the Historical Commission proudly honors and thanks the Stafford Community Service Crew for their help and preservation of the Stafford maintenance of the Stafford County Civil War Park. The crew does such things as maintaining the trails, keeping the vegetation trimmed. Now, Glenn Trimmer is one of the founders of the park, and he volunteers there about 3 times a week. And he said that the park would not stay in the pristine condition that it is now in if it weren't for the crew. These gentlemen go there weekly and maintain the trails, but recently they created new sets of trails across Accokeek Creek, which will enable visitors to see how and why the park was so valuable to the Union defenses in 1863. And hopefully this new section of the Stafford Civil War Park will be opened up in 1 to 2 months. All the work that the crew does helps keep the park in pristine condition so it can be enjoyed by Stafford citizens as well as tourists in our wonderful county. And Glenn Trimmer just said that they could not do it without you. So thank you so much to your crew that does that. And I'm going to put a little plug in for the Stafford Civil War Park. As I said, if you haven't been to Belmont, go to Belmont. If you haven't been to the Civil War Park, do plan to see it. It's spectacular. Thank you, supervisors.
Thank you, Ms. Connor, and thank all the recipients. Congratulations. We have some very rich history in this county, and I hope if you're a resident or even a non-resident that you can get out and see it. To me, it's fascinating, so it really is something to see. At this time, I would like to recognize Supervisor Tom Cohen, who will make a proclamation presentation to Ms. Irma Clifton for her work in the Falmouth Historic Port of Falmouth.
Well, good evening. It is an honor this evening to recognize somebody who's of great importance to Stafford County. She has been basically a hallmark for our county, particularly in the town of Falmouth, and making Falmouth the beautiful downtown Falmouth, as she loves to say it. Anyone who knows Irma knows of her great energy, her vast intelligence, and then a smile that could melt anything and make you do whatever you needed. And so it is really wonderful to be here, and not only to recognize her, but because I am proud to say you are a friend. And so the whole board would like to recognize you for your amazing work that you have done for the history of Stafford County and for this Falmouth area. So we did one of these long-winded proclamations. It was very hard getting it on one page, but so I'll have to hold it far out so I can see all the words. Whereas Irma Clifton is a long-time Stafford resident who has contributed immensely to the preservation of history in Stafford County, serving as a life member of the Historical Society and as president from 1987 to 1989. And whereas Ms. Clifton has lived in and helped preserve the historic Samuel Gordon House in Falmouth since the 1970s. And whereas Ms. Clifton served on the Old Falmouth Renaissance Commission, established by the Board of Supervisors in 2000 and was its president. And whereas Ms. Clifton was a member of the Historic Port of Falmouth Association, Incorporated, established by and comprised of citizens of Falmouth, in the 1990s to assist Stafford County with recommendations regarding Falmouth. And whereas Ms. Clifton donated period furniture to furnish the historic Shelton's Cottage in Falmouth. And whereas Irma Clifton worked with the Stafford Parks, Recreation, and Community Facilities and other county staff to open the cottage to the public for various occasions, including Historic Garden Week and other events, ensuring the cottage was handicapped accessible. And whereas Ms. Clifton received an Historic Preservation Award in 2017 from the Historical Commission for her work with Shelton's Cottage. And whereas, I told you there was a lot of whereases, whereas Ms. Clifton is known as an expert in the history of Falmouth and has contributed greatly to the preservation and interpretation of its history. And whereas Irma Clifton continues to serve Stafford County through her 2019 appointment to the Architectural Review Board, now therefore be it proclaimed that Stafford County Board of Supervisors on the 21st day of May 2019 honors and recognizes Irma Clifton for her outstanding contributions to the preservation and interpretation of history in Stafford County. Would you like to say anything?
Well, like to say that I built on the shoulders of people who came to Falmouth before I did. People like Miss Ida Brooks, Dr. Stewart from Hartwood, and a lot of other people who were members of that original group. So when I moved to Falmouth over 40 years ago, they imparted that love of Falmouth to me, and I'm hoping that I'm carrying it on to the next generation and to people who come after me. So Falmouth is a lovely, lovely place. Those of you who have heard me testify here before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, I always call it beautiful downtown Falmouth. So, and I think it is, and it will continue to be so. Thank you.
This time I will recognize Supervisor Cavalier for a presentation recognizing Brook Point High School Inspires Leaders. If I could ask the students to please come forward.
We got the whole stage here, so fill up both sides here. Mr. Roberts, come on up. All right, I got to say, I was surprised when I saw you all out in the parking lot before I came in because the purple shirts threw me. And I'm used to Brook Point red, but is it because you're a nonpartisan type group and purple is the combination of red and blue? Is that the idea? Oh, see, I'm not as stupid as people say I am. It's hard getting over that. But no, I've been invited to a couple of your events now. Ms. Shiloh Seaman always invites me to everything. I know Patrick Holzhauser couldn't make it here tonight, and we're happy to have Mr. Tim Roberts, the assistant principal at Brook Point High School, here. But they have done wonderful things, and I know I met Ms. Seaman a couple years ago because my son just started teaching at Brook Point then, and he has the classroom right next to hers. And so we met then, and I remember seeing her a few times through the year. In fact, Spirit Week in particular, and your little outfit you had on there, that was impressive. But no, you all have done fabulous work. I mean, to be the only high school in the Commonwealth of Virginia to be recognized as the top dog, basically, 3 years in a row. I'm sorry, I'm a year behind. Thanks for correcting me. And that means something. I mean, to get the Governor's Award for this is very impressive, and you should all be very proud of yourselves. And what did you tell me, Shiloh? 1,200 people? 1,200 new registered voters from the single high school. And so, you know, I mean, what's in the graduating class? How many? So you're talking 75% or more you're getting to register to vote. That's way above the national averages. So you should be very proud of yourselves. And I've been very impressed at all the ceremonies that you guys have had and the rallies and everything like that at the school. So I'm going to read this proclamation from the Board of Supervisors here. And it's a proclamation recognizing Brook Point High's Inspire Club for winning the Governor's Voter Registration Challenge 3 years in a row. I should have read this first. Whereas former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe established the Governor's High School Voter Registration Challenge in 2016 to encourage all eligible students to register to vote, as well as recognize schools that promote civic engagements and voter participation. And whereas an award is presented annually to schools who register at least 65% of their eligible senior class, you guys went well above that, and Commonwealth of Virginia to win the award 3 times. And whereas the voter registration drive at Brook Point is led by the Inspire Brook Point Club, a chapter of Inspire US, a nonpartisan national organization dedicated to getting students engaged in politics and fulfilling their civic duties. Inspire US has registered the last 3 years through its local chapters, whereas Inspire Brook Point has registered approximately, I'm going to say 1,200 students to vote since 2016, and whereas Inspire Brook Point had 40 rally working for money on such activities as creating a 10 I saw that. That was very good. Interview and whereas Patrick and Shiloh Seaman now that the Stafford County Day of May 2019 recognizes the Inspire for its achievements in educating students on the importance of voting and for signing up so. And if I can just say, every vote really does make a difference. I won, and I lost an election by 23 votes one time. So if you think your vote doesn't matter, some of us do. And so it really make this presentation. Who should have handed to? Right, yeah? Okay.
Well, Patrick couldn't be here tonight, so I definitely, we want to give kudos to Mr. H. These kids are amazing, and I am so proud. Not only I've probably taught over half of them in the classroom, but to get to work with these other kids and to see that they really do care what happens. They care that it matters to them, and I think that I'm the lucky one actually. So, thank you guys.
Thank you.
If you don't believe every vote counts, on the way out, stop and talk to Mrs. Reed. She will tell you how much every vote counts, believe me. You had some tight races, Mrs. Reed, but you came through. Okay. This time I'm going to recognize Ms. Bomke, and she will make a presentation recognizing the Stafford High School Drama Club. Is anyone here from the Drama Club can come down?
If you could please come forward now. You can come all the way around. This is great. I'll stand here with you. Okay. Can you scooch you down just a little bit more? Get close. There we go. Okay, we got to make room for Miss Ivory over there. Thank you. So welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting, and I want to introduce Chad Johnson, who's the Assistant Drama Director, and Mr. Daddario with the tie and the maroon shirt, and the Assistant Principal, Miss Amy Ivory, who I actually knew from Drew Middle School. So I know we have 2 students that are going to speak about the play Alice in Wonderland, and who are those 2? Okay, we'll start with you.
Good evening.
They're going to talk about the play, and then we're going to come back and circle back.
Good evening, Chairman Snellings, Vice Chair Dudenheifer. Members of the board, thank you very much for having us tonight. My name is Ali Oblonsky. I am honored to represent Stafford High School's theater department. I served as the assistant director for Alice in Wonderland from June 2018 through March 2019. And my goodness, what a wonderful year it was, and what a wonderful way to commemorate our journey. We traveled across the state of Virginia, performing in Norfolk at the Virginia Theater Association, where we received an honorable mention, as well as 2 All-State Cast Awards for Ryan Anderson and Ava Melanofi. In January, we began our festival competitions. At the sectional level, we won first place and had 3 Outstanding Actor Awards for Ryan Anderson, Ava Melanofi, and Austin Cox. At the regional level, we were wonderfully awarded first place with 2 outstanding actors, Ryan Anderson and Ava Melanofi. And at the state level, we were very honored to win the Class 5A Virginia High School Theater state championship title with 2 more outstanding actors for Ryan Anderson and Austin Cox. Thank you very much for recognizing us tonight. This is truly an honor, and we greatly appreciate all of your support of the arts.
Hello. Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chairman, and members of the board. I'm afraid I can't remember your names. I'm Ryan Anderson. I'm a senior at Stafford High School. I was one of the members of the ensemble, and I have a scripted piece that I have tried to memorize. So, the show begins with a dark recitation of the iconic Jabberwocky poem, and the actors are all coiled around each other as we are under the cover of an umbrella in darkness. We tumble out to find ourselves on a riverbank where Charles Dodson, the author of the book, is telling the story. The audience gets to witness the creation of the White Rabbit and watches as Lewis Carroll, Dodson's pen name and alter ego, is trying to guide Alice down the rabbit hole and through the hall of locked doors. She finds herself interacting with a menagerie of broken people in Wonderland. Sorry. She crashes a mad tea party, plays croquet with the Queen of Hearts, braves a forest of walking and talking trees, and matches wits with Humpty Dumpty. To stage this play, we had to forget all of our preconceived notions of the characters from Wonderland. We wanted to create relatable human characters, no silliness or wackiness just for the sake of it. One character that exemplifies this was the Mad Hatter. We asked ourselves as a company, what if the Mad Hatter's just a really angry hatter? And as we rehearsed, we discovered that he was bipolar. Another character that shows this is the Queen of Hearts. Underneath her tyranny is actually a deep-set insecurity and disappointment. We also found that in The White Knight is a young man who is battling with schizophrenia. Our adaptation also has Lewis Carroll as an actual character who serves as a confidant and nemesis for Alice. Character interactions were an intriguing challenge for us. The company who created this piece, they rehearsed and practiced with each other in isolation for 2 years, and so most of the character moments from the show were based in their personal relationships. So as our ensemble went on, we had to create those new moments with our own personal relationships informing those interactions. One instance is the Mad Hatter and the March Hare sharing a very complex friendship in which the Hatter looks to the Hare to be an emotional anchor point throughout the interaction in the Mad Tea Party. The physical demands of the show were immense as well. We spent our summer learning how to manipulate our bodies and voices to become the different characters and the environment of the show, as well as learning to become more comfortable with sharing each other's personal space. Lifts were used to create the illusion of Alice falling down the rabbit hole, and we used our bodies to transform into different objects and pieces of scenery, mutating into the caterpillar's mushroom, and also portraying certain objects, including the croquet balls, wickets, and trees. For us, the process of creating the whole piece was as much of an adventure as the main character faced in the story. Thank you.
Well, I think we all now understand with those 2 comments why you all won the state competition. So I asked the teacher also, Mr. Daddario, if each student would mind saying one thing that they have learned from the drama department, whether it was in this play or Peter and the Mad, thank you, or any other play that you've been involved in at Stafford High, because that's really what the public wants to know. And we have 5 phenomenal high schools in this county, and everybody there, you guys are all doing great things. So I was just wondering if each of you could, I know you've thought about what you wanted to say, and if you could just pass the mic around.
How to lead.
Okay, great.
A place to call home, really.
How to be fearless. What true family is.
Determination.
The experience was unforgettable.
To have patience with myself.
Persistence. To trust yourself and think that what you think is the first thing is the right thing.
It's been an educational journey.
I learned how to better manage my time.
Productivity is a word I like to use.
I found a community. To build confidence and long-lasting relationships.
Learn to use teamwork.
How to best care for myself and others.
We learned inclusivity and creativity.
A whole lot of love.
Hard work pays off.
It was rewarding, and it taught us how to be honest human beings that were just honest to each other and honest to ourselves with what we were feeling and what we did. Creativity.
How to be adventurous.
So that's what it's all about. It's about you growing, and did you know you're going to be a lifelong learner? Because that's what we are as adults and as young kids. And so I was never involved in the arts. When I was in high school, I was involved in athletics. But I have so much appreciation for the arts. And every play that I've seen at Stafford High School or any of the other schools, they're all phenomenal. And I really thank you for being a part of this club and bringing it to the community, and for everything that you're doing for yourself. And how much you're learning from each other. That's what it's all about. So with that, I'm going to read a proclamation, and then if Mr. Daddario would like to add some words, you're more than happy to. Whereas Stafford High School's Drama Club, the Stafford Players, has a reputation statewide for excellence. I'm sure when they see you coming, they're like, oh, no, Stafford High School. And has a history of winning many awards on all levels, regional, state, and national. And whereas the Stafford Players won first class in Class 5 at the Virginia High School League State Theater Festival for their production of an avant-garde adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. And whereas cast members and Stafford High School students Ryan Anderson and Austin Cox won Outstanding Actor Awards at the state level competition. And whereas Stafford High School students Ryan Anderson and Ava Malamfi were named to the all-state cast at the Virginia Theater Conference High School Theater Festival, where Alice in Wonderland also won the Technical Merit Award. And whereas teacher Michael Daddario, high school teacher, and student assistance director Ali Yablonsky. Now therefore, Stafford County Board of Supervisors, on this, the 21st day of May, 2019, that it be and hereby does recognize the Stafford Players for their many contributions and for their achievements in Virginia High School theater and excellent representation of Stafford County on the state level.
Thank you so much for having us this evening. Mr. Johnson and I just want to take the opportunity to say how proud we are to be your teachers and to be here with you guys this evening, our students. And thank you so much to the board for having us. And support the arts in Stafford County. Thank you so much for doing so.
you. Thank you. Have a good summer. Okay? And be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great job. Keep up the good work. Have a good job.
I was actually in the Stafford High School Drama Club. I won't tell you what year, but I played a starring role in the play called The Monkey's Paw, which is a great play, and really enjoyed it. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you. Oh, it's a great play. This time we're going to have presentations by the public. I would ask that when you step to the microphone that you give your name and address. Once you do that, the green light will come on. You will have 3 minutes. You can speak on any subject unless it is a public hearing for this evening, because you have to wait for that. When the yellow light comes on, you have about a minute. When the red light comes on, you need to wrap up your comments. I have one speaker card, Mr. Philip Horn.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, staff, before you run the clock, I'd like to bring this map, and the particular reports you should have one at your desk.
Could you state your name and address?
Thank you. And I'd like to draw your attention to the Aquia Landing section of this map. I'd like to address you this evening about a possible life-threatening traffic danger that may be waiting to happen here in Stafford County. I watched today's board meeting and the tribute to Helen Wang and the work that everybody has done to try to rectify the situation on Kellerman Road. And God forbid we should have another incident that we possibly can avoid a possible death. It may not involve directly a traffic incident. My wife and I were took a ride on Sunday out to Aquia Landing, and Aquia Landing has a soft spot in my heart because I was involved in helping that park as Aquia District Supervisor in the 80s. And my concern is this, is that as we were, if you look at the map, and you see Brook Road on the map, and then you see the Thorny Point Road where it enters into the park. If you proceed down that road and you see where it does a left, slightly left dogleg to the left there. We went down there to take a look at the beach. It's very popular at this point. And to our amazement, there's, as you're aware, there's 2 lanes of traffic, one in, coming out. We got halfway down that road, and we couldn't go any further. There were cars in front of us and cars behind us. On the left side of the road, which the traffic would be coming out, there were cars lined that whole way facing into the park. So there was 1 lane of traffic available for anybody trying that afternoon to get in there and try to get out. We were halfway down the road, and there were cars in line facing each other and people standing out and having a discussion as who was going to back up and move, okay? Memorial Day weekend is this weekend. My particular concern is that, God forbid, if there was an incident that required the public health and safety, sheriff's department, and anything like taking place there, because there was no squad trying to get through there. They never make it through there. Same thing, you couldn't get a fire engine down there if there was an incident. There was no way. There was no possibility. I had to back from the point of the park. We had to back all the way back to Thorny Point Road in reverse to get out of there. And my concern is that I don't know what was causing that, but it was a terrible situation, safety-wise, altercation-wise, or anything else like that. And I don't know how you address that, but if something happens, say this weekend, this is something that's probably preventable. And if somebody has an emergency out there, they're pretty likely going to die before anybody's going to be able to get to help them if that is a constant reoccurrence. I just want to bring that to your attention, and I hope that at some point we can address that issue, because it's a very serious situation there. And like I said, God forbid we have another very unfortunate and avoidable death in this county.
Thank you, Mr.
because
Horn,
of
for
that.
bringing that to our attention.
Thank you so very much.
Ask the county administrator to get with the Director of Parks and Recs and take a look at it and see if
Thank
there's
you.
something we need to do there. I don't have any more speaker cards. Is there anyone else in the chamber that wishes to speak on any subject with the exception of our 2 public hearings? Please come forward.
David Sousa, 3 Bella House Court, 22554. Good evening, members of the board. I've actually been looking at some satellite photos of the county from 1992, and it's very interesting how the landscape has changed over 25 years. It's incredible. But there's been some consequences as in our transportation and in our schools. And I believe that the only way to protect land is to purchase it and hold it yourself. So I'm about to make a ridiculous offer to the county, but I know if I don't, I'll hold it against myself forever, because I knew that I stood idly by as I watched the county and its school systems slip as the student-teacher ratio, the transportation, all that stuff. So the property identification from the GIS data was 29C1D, repeat, 29C1D, with an assessed value of $2,273,000, which dropped from $5,683,200 in 2008. The land is basically, if you drive down Mine Road, it's like on a slope, it's like this. It's very, I would say it's undevelopable, but if you look at what Embry Mill did, they completely leveled the place and they flattened it out. So I would say it's undevelopable, but you can change the landscape in any way. And Embry Mill really, that's just the one example I can think of. They really showed that. There's been some proposals, I believe, to build an elementary school there, but sandwiched between Hampton Oaks and Austin Ridge. You could do that, but I would suggest not, because the amount of money that you'd have to spend in order to flatten out that entire property, that lot of land, it would cost so much time and money. There may be I feel as if there'd be a better location in order to, it'd be better to find another place to do that where it costs the taxpayers less. Keep in mind, the government doesn't actually pay for anything, it's the taxpayers. And if we need to build an elementary school, you'd want to keep it as low as possible cost. So my offer would be $100 per acre and pay that amount in property taxes every year. It's 22.4 acres, which is better than what common areas of HOAs pay, because they pay $0, because the assessed value is 0. It has no value, but it's much flatter and they can build on it. They just chose not to. So if you have any questions about how this would go down, I'd be more than happy to answer it after the meeting, but I just know that I had to make this offer as I watch all of this go down over time, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the chamber that wishes to address the board? Seeing none, I bring it back to the board. Item number 23, public hearing, planning and zoning. Consider a conditional use permit. I'm sorry? Oh. Consider a conditional use permit amendment to allow one drive-through facility in the Highway Corridor Overlay Zoning District on a portion of tax map parcel 20-130 in the Garrisonville District. Mr. Harvey.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. If I could have the computer, please. As the chairman mentioned, this is a minor conditional use permit amendment. Under our code, a minor amendment is where we're addressing 2 conditions or fewer with an already existing conditional use permit. This particular minor amendment is dealing with a drive-through facility. It's located within the planned traditional neighborhood district, which within a project called the Garrison. Supervisor Dudenheffer spoke about that earlier today in the afternoon session. That project's getting ready to get underway, and this is one of the final pieces to try to wrap up some of the uses within the project. The property is approximately 0.84 acres. and it's owned by Route 606 Ruston LLC. This is an aerial image that shows the location of the proposed site. It would be located off of Garrisonville Road along the main entrance into the Garrison project. As you may recall with the zoning for the Garrison project, it's intended to be a mixed-use community where you'll have retail space, office space, community uses, as well as apartments, some of which may be over top of retail. So it's intended to be more of a town center type of atmosphere. However, these frontage parcels will have some draw from highway commercial type of uses. This is the zoning map of the area. As you can see with the zoning, the red color is existing commercial zoning, the yellow color is residential zoning, and at the bottom of the screen, the orange color is higher density residential zoning. So this area is a mix of transition, and this project does fit well into that transition. The image on to the right is the overall generalized development plan for the project. The area highlighted in red is the site location where this drive-through facility would be located. As you can see by the diagram, you have a series of commercial buildings along the west side of the property. There's also a main retail building in the back, and we have various office buildings and apartment buildings within the further back within the project. This is the generalized development plan that was submitted with this application. It shows a proposed multi-use building with a drive-through. The existing conditional use permit allows a drive-through for a bank. This would be a drive-through for a restaurant. The other condition that's changing is that the conditional use permit currently stipulates conformance with the generalized development plan. This plan has been modified to reflect a restaurant rather than a bank. So those are the two conditions that were applied for by the applicant. With the discussion with the Planning Commission, there were some additional changes to the conditions. Beyond those two that I mentioned, there were some other changes with regard to the stacking lanes, in particular with a bypass lane. That's a standard recommendation for conditional use permits for drive-throughs. And then also the Planning Commission had some concern about adequate turning radius for semi-trucks or box trucks if they were used for delivery
Mr.
purposes.
Harvey, Mr. Dudenheffer has a question.
Yes, sir.
Jeff, the bypass lane, is that, in your opinion, is that necessary for this development? Wouldn't it require a total redesign of the building if they were to go ahead and put one in?
Well, Supervisor Dudenheffer, in this case, if the bypass lane was provided, which this plan currently does not show one, it would generally be located in the area here, which would force the building to be pushed further this way, which may result in a loss of parking in this side of the building. So that could have an adverse.
The parking to the west of it, shared parking for another restaurant that's going in over there? That would affect that, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would affect the overall parking for the center. We have two different buildings. This building here, which is sort of a shared retail and restaurant use. And then this building is a multi-tenant building potentially. So this parking field here is shared amongst both buildings.
And the restaurant on the other side, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. How many buildings do you think this coffee chain has built similar to this?
If I was to
Worldwide,
speculate, I
would
would
you-
say they're in the thousands.
Okay, so would you believe that that would mean that they know what they're doing? I mean, to me, that's a logical assumption. If they've built 1,000 of these things worldwide, that they would have some reasonable expectation that their design is fluid and works well?
Correct. And as I mentioned earlier, a standard recommendation is for a bypass lane. For the most part, that applies significantly to parcels that have their own entrance, say, for instance, on Garrisonville Road. In this case, there is no entrance on Garrisonville Road. You have to come through on the internal streets to get to this entrance, either from the main entrance or the side entrance here. So it doesn't have a bypass lane would not have the effect here as it would, or the importance of a bypass lane wouldn't be as significant here as it would be in other situations where there's direct access onto Garrisonville Road.
Okay, and on the item number 8, the turning radius, when the Planning Commission reviewed this, had they heard from the applicant about the, how they will be resupplying this restaurant?
Supervisor Dudenheffer, I don't recall that specifically. I know the Planning Commission was concerned about this particular turning movement, and if there was a service vehicle coming in, especially a large truck, would it potentially block some of these parking spaces in this vicinity?
Would it make a difference if we found out from the applicant that the resupply takes place at about 3 a.m. in the morning, and the largest truck would be some kind of a panel truck, not a semi, as is mentioned in the...
Supervisor Dudenheffer, that certainly is informative. Right now, there's no conditions stipulating to the types of delivery vehicles, and that would be difficult for the county to enforce. But it behooves an owner of a business to ensure that they're not impeding their own operation.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Some of the issues that came up when this application was reviewed was traffic impacts. A restaurant will generate more traffic typically than a bank would. However, when we looked at the overall traffic study for the project, the additional trips associated with the drive-through for the restaurant would not exceed what was already approved in the traffic study. Architectural design being a planned traditional neighborhood development, that this project already has architectural standards that apply for the whole project in its entirety. So there's no need for additional consideration of architectural design with this specific permit. The comprehensive plan recognizes this property to be within a commercial corridor. Certainly the drive-through uses and the restaurant activity is something that's compatible with our comprehensive plan. From the staff's findings, we believe there are many positives. The conditions can limit the intensity and external impacts of the use based on the requirement to conform with the generalized development plan and specifically a drive-through for a restaurant. As I mentioned earlier, it's consistent with our comprehensive plan recommendations and consistent with the criteria for issuance of a conditional use permit. Staff does not see any negative aspects with this minor conditional use permit amendment. The Planning Commission in its deliberations also recommended approval of the application, and that was with these conditions pursuant to Resolution R19-75.
Any other questions for Mr. Harvey? Thank you, Jeff. Is the applicant here? Would the applicant like to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members, and staff. My name is Deborah Ray Carnes. I am a land use attorney and land use planner working for Lemming and Healy on Garrisonville Road, and also a Stafford County resident. I'd like to thank staff for their assistance with this application. As Mr. Harvey noted, it's a relatively simple application. This is an approved mixed-use zoning district. A conditional use permit for a drive-through has already been issued for a bank. And so the only change really was the change of use to a coffee shop with a drive-through. The issue, quite rightfully, that the Planning Commission looked at was circulation, because circulation is a safety issue for both pedestrian and the automobiles using it. Now, I presented this matter to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission was looking at a staff recommendation for a bypass lane. The county code requires stacking, in other words, a minimum amount of space for each car entering the drive-through lane, and it emphasizes the importance of circulation. It does not require a bypass lane, however. The applicant is requesting the deletion of the bypass lane from the conditions because the chain does not find it necessary in their design. I can explain a little further the question, has anyone asked the applicant what their needs be, how they get their product delivered? And I can tell you, I had been sent to discuss that application to the Planning Commission on like 2 hours' notice. And the Planning Commission asked me if the applicant used semi or box trucks to deliver their product. And I quite honestly said, didn't tell them about the 2-hour notice, but I said, I'm sorry, I do not know. I can check with the applicant and we'll make sure that that's handled down the line. We've since confirmed with the applicant there is no need. They don't use a box truck. They don't use semis for delivery. As Supervisor Dudenheffer said, the delivery occurs in the very early hours of the morning and should not affect traffic circulation at all. I'll be happy to answer any other questions you have.
Any questions? Ms. Baumke?
Okay, I want to make sure I understood what you said. You said the company that will be using this facility does not use box trucks and does not use 18-wheelers.
For servicing their individual restaurants, yes.
Okay, so then what are they using at 3 o'clock in the morning?
They're using smaller vehicles.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So
Ms. Baum-
a
sorry, Ms.
vehicle that's smaller than a box truck.
I have an email, but I can't put my hands on it right now, which describes it, but it's much smaller than a semi or a box truck.
My definition of a box truck is pretty bulky. Yeah.
Well,
Any other questions to the applicant? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. With that, we'll open up the public hearing. As just to remind you, you have 3 minutes once you state your name and address. When the green light comes on, the yellow light is 1 minute. When the red light comes on, your time is up. Does anyone like to address this? Since there's only one citizen, not a government official or
Or a
reporter.
reporter.
Would you like to address this? I mean, you're the it.
You drink coffee?
But thank you for being here. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to board and close the public hearing. Mr. Dudenheffer, this is your district.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move for Resolution R19-75, less item 7, which deals with the bypass lane, and 8, which deals with turning radius for semi-tractor trailer trucks.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Dudenheffer, a second by Ms. Shelton. Any discussion? Seeing none, cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion passes 6-0 with 1 absent.
Thank you.
Item number 24, Planning and Zoning, amend and reordain Stafford County Code regarding landscaping standards and the design and construction standards for landscaping, screening, and buffering, manual by reference. Proposed ordinance 019-15. Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an item that's been approximately 2 years in the making. It goes back to 2017 when yourself and Supervisor Baumke were a committee on the board to look at streamlining some of our development processes and to make it easier for our development applicants and make it easier for staff as well. And so one of the target areas was looking at our design and construction standards manual for landscaping and buffering. This process took 2 years because it involved a number of iterations with the Planning Commission, a couple of Board of Supervisors members, and a couple of iterations of input from the development community. overall, I'm very pleased with the product that we've gotten. It's addressed some of the specific issues that Ms. Bomke has had with regard to street buffers along our collector streets and arterial streets, specifically reducing the number of plant units required so that it allows some more flexibility for the business owner to have better site visibility of the business. Also trying to address some of Mr. Cohen's concerns about parking lots lacking islands, specifically for trees and other shrubbery. And then Ms. Shelton's concerns about xeriscaping and using native species. As the chairman mentioned, there's two parts here. We have ordinance amendments, amending our subdivision and zoning ordinance, as well as amendments to our design standards manual. In particular, the ordinance amendments deal with changing the reference to the current manual, from the current manual to the proposed manual. The current manual was done in 2005. This proposed manual will be dated in 2019, so there are a number of technical changes that have to be made. There's also new definitions added to match what's being done in the manual, so the zoning ordinance is in harmony with the manual. There is also reference to the reorganization that took place between the Planning Department and Public Works. So a lot of the implementation for the design construction standards in the field is done by Public Works, and plan review is done by planning. Some of the other features with regard to the update, we also deleted previous listing of plantings. We were finding that a number of developers were coming in and saying, well, the types of plants we want to plant aren't on your official list, so what do we do? The standards manual allows for substitutions, but we thought that was kind of cumbersome. So what we do is we got rid of the required plant list, and we have a series of reference materials where people can look up to see what kind of plants that they would like to plant within their project. The one exception is that they cannot plant any invasive species. We will not allow that in our plan approval process. With interior parking lot landscaping, we've gone towards a standard which a lot of jurisdictions in this region are going to as well. 5% of our parking area will be devoted to landscaping. Our current requirement is that we have 30 square feet for every parking space for landscaping. We found that that's a bit difficult to manage it at times, and the 5% seems to be acceptable in a lot of jurisdictions. Loudoun County is looking at adopting this very same standard. Hanover County has it, the city of Fredericksburg. So other localities use it, and it's fairly standard. And that was one of the benefits of having some input from the development community. Mr. Jonathan Fairbanks from Fairbanks and Franklin, who's a well-renowned civil engineer in the area, helped us out tremendously with regard to the practical applications of this amendment. Also, to getting to Mr. Cohen's concerns, that this amendment would require one landscape island for every 16 parking spaces, or a single row of landscaped area for double row for 32 parking spaces.
Mr. Chairman, going back a slide. Couple questions. That increasing the plant units from 21 to 75 per 100 linear feet, that's more than tripling the current, right?
Yes, and that is in the case of a transitional buffer. So that's a buffer that's required between dissimilar uses, say for instance a school and a manufacturing facility. So that's mainly intended to provide more shielding between the different uses. And a plant unit can be either a tree, a large tree, a small tree, a shrub, or grasses. So the standards manual will give a lot of flexibility to the designer as far as what materials they're going to use. But as you point out, this is one area where it was felt that we needed to beef up our standards to some degree. We did, like I mentioned earlier, reduce the standards along the streets, especially for commercial development.
And the other question was the landscape islands. I mean, what's the thought process to put one of those in every 16 spaces?
And I'll demonstrate that to you on some additional slides here.
Looking forward to that.
This slide shows a comparison of our existing regulations in the upper left-hand corner and proposed regulations in the lower right-hand corner. This is not an existing site, but it's a site that is currently under design and consideration by an applicant. It's for industrial zone property where they're looking at building a flex office space. The site on our current regulation shows the requirement that there be 30 square feet of landscaped area per parking space. It's estimated that the planning area would be 12,507 square feet. In the end result, both the new regulations, it would have this very similar square footage requirement, just off by almost 100 square feet, where we're requiring a little bit more. But you can see from the diagram with the light blue islands, there are more islands distributed throughout the parking lots. So that's the most significant impact with the proposed amendment going with the 5% landscaping requirement. This is another image on this slide that shows existing Target in South Stafford at Southern Gateway, and then also a Target store shopping center in Hanover County. The significant difference you can see between Stafford County and Hanover is that the design of where all the landscape islands are in Stafford tends to be on the perimeter of the parking lot. Whereas in the Hanover example, you're getting more landscaping within the interior of the parking areas. And again, that was to address some of the concerns that the Planning Commission and that Supervisor Cohen had. The Planning Commission has endorsed these proposed changes, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions that the board may have.
Any questions for Mr. Harvey? Thank you, Mr. Harvey. It's time to open the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak for or against? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the board, close the public hearing. What's your pleasure? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 019-15.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any discussion? Mr. Cavalier?
Yeah, I'm not going to support this. I just think we're making more rules and regulations and making it harder for commercial development in this county instead of making it easier, so I can't support this.
Ms. Bomke?
Yeah, I would just like to say I really appreciate your additional efforts on this. You guys really took into consideration what some of us had to say, and that was just really key information from what we had heard from the public. So I feel like this is really ready to be approved. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, thank you for, and I was on this 2 years ago, in the Planning Commission. And one of the things that we've worked for, and from talking to people on the Planning Commission, the intention was to actually take some of the burdens off of the businesses. Where before there were more regulations about what types of plantings and where the plantings and such, this gives a little bit more flexibility. So because this was more environmentally friendly and business friendly, that's why I was happy to be part of it, and I'll support it.
Any other comments?
I'd like to,
Michelle?
yeah, I'd also like to support it. The pieces that I liked, because I understood from Ms. Bomke when I first came on the board, some of the challenges we have, so I like the incorporation of that. There are some aspects here we didn't talk about that actually allow us to be able to control stormwater management a little bit better with the use of native species. We talked about xeriscaped, and I know you talk about it here in an arid environment, but still the application of putting plants in places where they don't have to be watered, where they can survive naturally, is incorporated in this concept, and that's why I will support this. Thank you for providing those opportunities for people to provide a little bit more flexibility on what they want to be able to plant and what kind of plantings, and not be forced into planting species that have to have external irrigation. I was looking for that. Thank you.
Mr. Cavalier?
And just the fact that this took 2 years to develop is to me, something that we could spend our time better elsewhere, expediting some commercial development that we have in this county instead of worrying about trivial things.
Anyone else? I have a motion. I have a second. Cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion passes 5-1 with one absent. In closing, I just want to thank my fellow board members and staff. This has been a very emotional day for all of us. So get a good night's sleep, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Meeting adjourned.